across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning. Happy Thursday to you. Another searingly hot day. I'm not complaining, though. It is beautiful out there. A bit cooler last night, though. Did you find that? I actually slept pretty well in the circumstances. But you know what they say? When the sun shines, make hay. Or if you were a people trafficker, get as many people as possible onto a giant dinghy that has been custom made in the back streets of China, shipped across Asia, kept in big warehouses which aren't allowed to go under surveillance in Germany, brought to brand new parts of the French coastline where the gendarme will help you hand out life jackets and push your paying passengers out to sea, at which point the UK Border Force will turn up and, yeah, they won't defend the border. They will invite you in because on it goes. Andy Burnham saying the plan is still working. Well, video has been emerging. Chris Phillips, who is, of course, the former immigration minister, now Shadow Home Secretary, is gallivanting around the beaches of Normandy and talking about invasions, but not ones that happened almost 100 years ago. No. He is talking very much about what is going on today and the fact that we are paying the French to essentially ship people over to Britain. Now, we cannot put boots on the ground in France. We cannot treat that as our own jurisdiction to police as we wish. So we rely on the French to do that for us, which is why we're sending them massive checks saying, look, please, can you stop those boats from leaving your beaches? But when you look at video, it's not that they're just, well, not really managing to stop all the boats leaving the beaches, that the odd one accidentally gets through under the cover of darkness. No, you got these young whippersnapper police in France who are just saying we've got to help them. We've been told we've got to be nice to them. We've got to, you know, bid them a fond farewell and send them on their merry way to the UK. Now, who are these people, right? We know that the IRGC is using illegal routes to ship in terror cells. We know that a lot of these men may well have committed crimes. They're fugitives. They're on the run from their own countries or even other authorities in Europe. We know many of them are basically economic chancers who want to come and work on the black market. And then there will be a dark underbelly of others who have deeply malign intent, especially towards our women and girls. So you would think, right, that this would require declaring some sort of national emergency as onwards they come. A flotilla of up to 1,000 headed off just the other day. 1,000. It is an invasion. If you look at the etymological meaning of the word invasion, that is what it is. And as far as I can tell, France is actually aiding and abetting it. We have to get serious about this. This is going to be the greatest crisis of our generation. Society will be damaged irreparably, and Lord knows what some of these people breaking into the country have it within their intentions to do to us on our streets. Well, let's speak now to Paul Richards, who's a former Labour Special Advisor. Paul, Andy Burnham said the plan is working. It's really not, is it?
Well, the numbers are down, but obviously the scenes on our screens tell us that there is still an ongoing crisis on the border. And what worries me about the footage over the last few hours, really, is the intransigence of the French. They just seem to be standing around watching. There was a smaller force that has been trained within the gendarmerie to tackle this with Stanley knives and to actually, you know, slash the boats before they hit the seas. But that's a tiny percentage of the bigger police presence there, who seem to stand around, as you described, Alex, watching. And maybe even abetting what's going on. So I think there needs to be a much tougher approach with the French authorities to stop these boats. And the reason I say that is that once they're on the water, it is too late. You know, once the supply chain has worked that you've described there of getting boats from China to the coast and then sticking them on there, you know, there are people watching this may favour some sort of military intervention or machine gunning them or whatever it might be, but that isn't a realistic option. Once they're on the water, it's too late. So they've got to be stopped leaving the beaches by the French.
I mean, I can't imagine if we had the mindset of, well, you know, once they're on the water, it's too late in other times of our history where people invaded us by boat. But what frightens me, Paul, is this. We have had it now directly from the horse's mouth, the IRGC saying, of course, we're slipping in terrorists and operatives through illegal routes. In fact, Robin Simcox, the counter-extremism czar, told the previous government that these illegal routes would be being used by terrorist organisations, A, to make money from the people trafficking, to line their pockets, B, to ship in their operatives, and C, also to bring in caches of weapons. This is a national emergency. We don't know who these people are. They're being scattered around the country in HMOs, military bases where they can come and go as they wish. And Andy Burnham has just not said anything about it. It's like he's got his fingers in his ears going, la, 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 la. Well, it's not a popular topic with the people, so I'm just going to avoid it.
Well, his government, or the previous Labour government, prescribed the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, so that was an important step forward. We know there's been 20 plots by Iran foiled by our security services. There's an awful lot of work going on that we don't know about to disrupt this, of course, because they are a major threat to our well-being. And there are lots of plots that are being foiled and boats that aren't being launched, and there are terrorists who are being arrested. Now, of course, you need to do more to secure our safety. Of course you do. But the idea that Andy Burnham is ignoring this. He's a politician to the tips of his fingers. He knows full well the electoral impact as well as the impact on our security of this. The fact he's kept Shabana Mahmood in post, I think, with a slightly tougher approach than some of the other possible contenders. The fact he's put Jo White into that post, she is a tough cookie on immigration and tackling the boats, and others too. So I think there is a resolve at the heart of this government to fix this by the time of the election. And, you know, I'll say what I always say, which is if there was a single simple thing you could do to stop this overnight, then any government of any stripe, including Chris Phillips' government, would have done it, and there isn't.
You say that, but Greece was turning boats around. They're doing that out of the north of Africa. They're being intercepted, leaving places like Tunisia. So I think there probably is a more simple solution. But what I don't understand is why he's not spoken about it at all. This is one of the key electoral issues, a massive political crisis of our age. We knew he was in the run-up to becoming Prime Minister. We went through the Makerfield by-election. He's done various interviews, decided to go talk about Gaza with Gary Lineker, made a speech at the TUC. That's all good and well, but I've been sitting in the studio now. This is my 7th show in a row, and I know everything going on because I read the newspapers and listen to all the broadcasts every single day, and he's not said a squeak other than to tell us the plan's working, which to me is just a downright lie. Why? What, has he said anything? What has he said? What's he going to do? I've missed it.
Well, he will, of course, have to address it. And, you know, I don't think he can be accused of being quiet over the last 2 weeks. He's had something to say about most things. And he'll get to this, of course. He's announcing a major expansion of our nuclear fleet today in Barrow and a huge investment in nuclear arms. And that's part of our security solution, being part of a strong NATO and facing down the major threat from Russia. I'll challenge you on something you said earlier, Alex. You said the greatest emergency of our time are these people coming on boats. It isn't. It's Russia is the greatest emergency. That's the greatest threat to us right now. So he is strong on security, and he's put the right people into government jobs to tackle this, because tackle it we must.
When we have a coordinated rising up of all the jihadist sleeper cells that have been smuggled into the country and we've got nuclear weapons to deal with it, I'm not really sure how that's going to pan out. I'm not saying that Russia isn't a threat. I'm not saying that the announcement today isn't welcome when it comes to actually doing something about making sure our nuclear stockpile is fully functional, because the last time I saw anything about that, Grant Shapps was stood at the helm of a boat and a missile plopped into the ocean 100 feet ahead of him, which was fairly alarming. But people are deeply concerned about this. They open the newspapers. They see every single day attacks on women. They see villages like Biddington being turned into migrant camps, essentially, with undocumented men allowed to come and go. It terrifies me. As a citizen, it terrifies me. And actually, that keeps me awake at night a lot more, quite frankly, than Russia. And I just think that there's a deliberate reason he has not spoken about it. He's not spoken about it because he knows he's got nothing to say on the issue. He's brushing it under the carpet. And I just don't think we can afford to do that.
I dispute that. I think he's absolutely on top of it, and he is apprised of the electoral consequences and the genuine fears that people may have. I mean, a national conversation around violence to women and girls is important too, because you'll know, as an informed person on the topic, that most violence towards women and girls is from people they know, from husbands and from boyfriends and neighbours.
No. The amount of
attacks
is
on women,
disproportionate.
by people they know.
The number of foreign-born individuals committing violence against women and girls is disproportionate. 1 in 4 attacks are committed by foreigners, and 1 in 4 people in this country are not born abroad. And I've done a lot of research into this and made documentaries on it. And it's amazing, isn't it, actually, how many attacks are being conducted by men who have turned up yesterday on a boat from misogynistic countries, men who have actually committed crimes back in other European countries and are trying to evade the law over there and coming here. It is a very dangerous situation, particularly perilous for young girls, I would argue. And I just don't think it's good enough that nothing has been said on this. I mean, look, that is my opinion. It's probably the opinion of most people sitting and listening to this programme. It is also, actually, as it turns out, the opinion of the President of America, who so far seems to have cordial relations with Andy Burnham. Shall we have a little look at what Donald Trump said overnight? Oh, we don't have that clip, I am afraid, so we will not be playing it. But Donald Trump has essentially warned Andy Burnham he is killing Britain with migrants coming from all over the world and just camping out. I mean, if the Americans can understand this is an existential crisis for Europe, I cannot fathom why multiple world leaders, a supranational organisation in the form of the EU, we've just come out of a government run by essentially human rights law experts, and we're still in the quagmire of indecision, nothing we can do. They're little boats crossing the water with potentially violent terrorist men coming in who directly threaten the population of this country. A government's first duty, surely, is to protect its people. When is he going to make a speech on this? Do we know? Is he going to address this? Is he going to give us any sorts of announcements, whether the plan has changed, what he's going to do differently?
Well, as I say, he's making a speech on defence and security now, as we speak, in Barrow-in-Furness, as he reinforces Britain's defences. And of course, the government is all over this issue every single day. Ministers are being briefed minute by minute on what's happening on the beaches, who is on the water, and what's happening to them. If there's security threats, then the security services are informing ministers that particular individuals are in play, and they will be dealt with. And of course, you know, the bigger picture is we're closing the hotels that people were so objecting to. We're trying to get more people so we can do faster processing, so that the refugees who are supposed to be here can stay, and the ones who are not are kicked out ASAP, not waiting around for years like they were under the Chris Phillips regime, and fixing this on the borders. But like I say, it needs to be done step by step, because you can't do it with a single simple solution. And people say, oh, we'll just change the constitution. You know, let's have a big constitutional conversation and change the EHRC. That doesn't make any difference at all. That doesn't mean that suddenly there's fewer people wanting to come and live in this country, or the criminal gangs are suddenly disarmed. It's an absolute red herring. So, you know, like I say, if you could do it with a simple stroke of a pen, then any government would, because no government wants it at all. And to say Andy Burnham is not interested in this or is not concerned, look at the appointments he made to government. Look at the things that he's being briefed on daily that the government is doing and the authorities are doing to stop it. And you can see that the numbers are down, and he's being told that certain things are working, and I think that's fair.
Well, you can excuse Mrs Miggins in Middlesbrough for having missed those vital appointments and the briefings he's getting in private, and therefore not understanding that Andy Burnham is taking this as seriously as perhaps she would like him to do. Paul, thank you ever so much. It's always great to have you on the programme, catching up. I mean, I'm sorry that there's got to be simple solutions. If there isn't one, make one, right? This is a crisis. This is a direct threat to our security, to the integrity of our society. I mean, we are inviting in potential killers, terrorists, fugitives, murderers, rapists, you name it. They're coming in and they're being, I don't know, distributed into every last town and city in this nation. And successive governments have done nothing, sitting on their hands. Oh, we can't do anything. Oh, well, it's too difficult to do something. Oh, well, this law, that law. Oh, we can't leave the ECHR. People might look down on us if we did that. If you go look at it yourself, right? Other countries are turning boats around. If Australia could turn boats around and somehow are not in The Hague, then I'm pretty sure we could do the same. And you know what? If France says, no, 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 you can't turn around back here, saying, well, no, 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 you can't launch them off your beaches to us, because that is what they're effectively doing. They're essentially giving the boats a push, handing out life jackets. I'm afraid we've got to do something. The cost of doing nothing will be people's lives. It has already been people's lives. And so, no, Mr. Burnham, I don't want to talk about it. I might need the summer to think about it. Oh, but what we've done already is working. It's gaslighting. Get on with it. This is a crisis. You're the Prime Minister. You're not the parochial mayor of, you know, Little Whittington anymore. You're not just here to ribbon cut, flutter your eyelashes, talk about your dad's health. You're here to deal with major international issues, whether that be war, whether that be something domestic. And quite frankly, this is now building up to war in this country, and if we don't grab this by the nettle very soon, the price that will be paid does not bear thinking about. All right, if you want to get in touch with the programme, the number is 03444 99 1000. It is your normal network rate. You can use that number as well to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number to send a text message. If you're going to do that, you've got to write the word talk before you write out your message. Everything costs your normal rates. We're going to take a short break. After that, I'm going to, well, read some of your messages and hopefully get a little bit of catharsis over the phone. Some free therapy with you at the other side of the telephone wire. So the number is 03444 99 1000. Come on, cheer Alex up today. See you just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, Alex. Margaret currently in Tunisia. The plan is working. This is what the Fabianists and globalists want. They've infiltrated every part of Britain, dumbed down education, and are flooding the country of unknown and undocumented people, mostly men. In a year or two, we will be living under a dictatorship. And Orson Welles, well, it's not Orson Welles, wrong man, George Orwell, 1984 horror will be complete. I fear we'll never be able to stop it now. Maybe Orson Welles might be part of it as well. You never know. The level of treachery from people like this guest, you mean Paul Richards, is astounding to me. How can any Englishman defend foreign criminals over our own women and children? I don't know. I know, I'm fed up with hearing the word refugees. You know, if they're refugees, they go to a neighbouring country. We can throw some, you know, canvas and some cans of food over to countries like Kenya, which have big refugee camps in the north, or Ghana, and, you know, our allies, and say, let's make sure these people have food and shelter where they are. By the time you've gone through multiple different countries, paid people traffickers a load of money, cavorted with terrorists and broken into a country illegally, having thrown your documents into the sea, you're not a refugee. This is an invasion, says Paul. Correct. It's as simple as that. Our governments are allowing it. The EU are happily complicit. The old saying goes, the barbarians never take a city until the gates are held open for them. Well, the EU and the UK are holding the gates open happily and allowing us to be invaded. Why our government can't see this is a staggering dereliction of duty. They are allowing this and it needs to stop. This is a national emergency. It is a national emergency and I'm sorry. Of course, this idea of we've got an emergency but the government can't do anything. Oh, well, you know, looks like there's a massive pile-up on the M4, but I don't think the fire service can do anything about that. Oh, look, Alex is sitting in a studio for the next 2 hours and 40 minutes, but, yeah, no, I'm not sure if she's going to be able to fill the airtime with opinion and news. I'm sorry, you are the government. You have to do something. It's been going on too long, and now we have everything evidentially in place to declare a national emergency. Can you imagine, right, you know, when it was World War II, going like, oh, see that Hitler? Well, it's all happening over there, isn't it? We've run out of aeroplanes, and I'm not sure we've got the manpower or the munitions, so, oh, well, probably can't do anything about that, can we? It's just mad. It is mad. It makes no sense. Honestly, I live in cognitive dissonance because of this. You all do. We all do. Any other blimmin' country on earth, if a load of random men, some of them with weapons, many of them completely unidentifiable, were making their way, powering their way across a 12-mile stretch of water to invade you in a little rubber boat? A little rubber boat? Do you think other governments would be like, ooh, that's a thinker. Not really sure what to do about that. We couldn't stop the Vikings, could we, 1,000 years ago, so probably can't stop these ones. Come on. Jeez. Right, let's speak to Joe in Sussex. Hello, Joe. Sussex, eh? You had your first boat down in Eastbourne, didn't you?
I'm so depressed now. Listen to the last 5 minutes. Listen, it's an invasion. It's an invasion. I caught half of that conversation. I didn't know who that guy was. But it is an invasion. All we've got to do is, if they had rifles, then, you know, like, it's an invasion. Full stop. Right.
Look, there are multiple ways to deal with this. They have multiple choices. All of them seem to be too complicated. If the civil service is being intransigent, sack them. If human rights legislation is preventing you from being able to act on this, repeal it. You know, if the Army and the Navy say, oh, well, you know, we've gone a bit woke, we don't really want to intercept boats, you fire the heads of the Army and the Navy. You do things. You make decisions. You are the government. You are top of the pile. The buck stops with you, and there will be blood on the hands of everybody who has enabled this through inactivity. And I'm getting I've always been serious about this, but believe you me, today I cannot have another day of these newspaper front pages. I cannot. I was reading the other day in my lovely leafy part of the West Country, they're building 3,000 new houses. Thankfully not around my particular village, but, you know, other side of town. And I think I know what's going to happen. With those 3,000 new houses, I bet you there will be a quotient of them which are ratioed off and put to one side and ring-fenced for our new friends from places like Syria and Afghanistan and Iran and Somalia and Sudan. All those lovely people, I don't know who they are. I bet they're going to get a portion of that new housing. And then do you know what's going to happen? I'm going to walk through my town centre and there's going to be a load of people that I've never seen before who nobody knows. In a town centre where everyone says hello to each other, where we basically have zero crime, where people don't lock their front doors, all of a sudden things are going to change because of this. And I am so at the end of my tether. We all are. I don't know what we can do about it. We didn't get to vote for this clown who says there's no problem and the plan's working. Nobody decided that he should be in number 10. Other than himself and his cronies, and he's got the audacity now of having the highest office in the land and not doing anything or saying anything about our biggest issue. Heaven forfend, Joe. Heaven forfend. Let's speak to David in Cambridgeshire. Hello, David.
Hey, how you doing? You all right?
Well, I'm winding myself up a little bit this morning, but otherwise, yeah, I'm doing swimmingly well, thank you.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to give my experience what's been going on. It's been going on for in my area about 5 years. I'm in South Cambridgeshire. There was no new faces around here 5 years ago. Now I say to my wife, you drive to the shop half a mile away, you can't not see like an immigrant, someone doesn't look like they're from the area. Gone to the park with the kids before. It's like a private little toddler's park, you know, little gate around it, little kids bouncy rides on it. 2 immigrants sat on the bench in there watching, I think they're watching porn on their phones. It just doesn't feel safe anymore around here. You see like a lady walking down the streets, like 2 big tubs of like vegetable in her hand, balancing something else on the head. It just didn't used to be like that around here at all. And it's
but you know what? You know, if we're saying such ghastly things, noticing the stranger within your realm, that makes you a horrible racist. That makes you a fascist. You know, David. You're far right. You're the problem, by the way.
If you call it out, you can't do anything about it. Another thing is in the kids' school now. There's a couple of kids that come from immigrant areas. They've a teaching assistant assigned to them all day because, of course, they can't speak English. And my daughter, she was struggling with maths and she wouldn't get the attention 24/7 like they were getting. It's just completely wrong. Just because they couldn't speak the language, they'd have a teacher with them all day. Any kids that struggle with maths, it's just kind of, you know, they're not helping. And you're seeing it already. But because if they don't do it, they'll be accused of, you know, like say, racism, or you're not supporting, you know, families that can't speak English. Is just completely wrong.
I mean, there's one thing, right, about the argument that charity should start at home, that we should be prioritising our own vulnerable. I mean, Andy wants to end homelessness. He didn't manage to do that in Manchester, did he? But OK, great. We should be putting our homeless veterans, our own people who have, like, fallen off the edge of society, who might have drug issues, who might need rehabilitation, who live complex, difficult lives, who are on the margins of society. They are our problem. They're born and bred here, and we should look after them. And then there's the argument that when you have people in desperate need coming from crisis-ridden countries, and they find their way here, that the charitable, decent, last Christian thing to do is to look after all of humanity. The stranger is your neighbour. And as a Christian, I buy into that. But I'll tell you what isn't. What isn't is allowing murderers, rapists, terrorists to come in and actively distribute them around your country, within your communities, where they pose a direct threat to your own women and children. That is madness. That is evil. And this is what I just... We know about the security threats now. There is emergency legislation where, I mean, they should be convening a meeting right now. First stop should have been to visit Emmanuel Macron and say, listen, mate, I know you've got some wildfires, but we've got a problem with the channel. And I'm afraid, son, it's got to the point a boat's going to go back in your direction to send out the sign that they're not going to be able to traverse anymore. And you might not like that. You might not like that, but we're watching your gendarmerie push the boats out and distribute the life jackets, and that ain't what we're paying you for. So do you know what? The game is changing, my man. One boat, I've said this for years, just one boat intercepted and dragged back in the other direction, and all the traffickers would go, oh, because it would go viral. It would be on every single handset of every single migrant and trafficker and foreign government, and it would be sending the message, not under our watch, not anymore. And would anyone die as a result? No. People are dying because they're being stabbed up in the sand dunes of Calais. People are dying because they end up in the Main trying to get across the Mediterranean from North Africa. People are dying because they're being stripped off the exodus of poor humans being trafficked and taken off for organ harvesting or sold into sex slavery. Stopping this is what's going to save lives, not perpetuating it and enabling it. Right. Let's take a breath, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about those wildfires in France. I mean, we know it's hot, OK. It's been hot in France before, so what is really going on? Is this all about climate change, or are there other things that we need to be looking at right now? We're going to be discussing that with the brilliant journalist Ross Clark, who knows a lot about a lot, just after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, give Martha a chance. Anything that happens, you know, if we have one drop of rain, that's climate change. If there happens to be 3 rainbows in a day, climate change. If we have a very cold winter, climate change. If we don't have a cold winter and it's a mild winter, climate change. If it's especially hot for a prolonged 44 days in a row, climate change. If it's one of those summers where we have mass flooding instead and it doesn't really make it above 18 degrees, that's right, climate change. It's no longer called global warming because, no, it's just climate change because then you can attach it to anything. So, of course, wildfires, climate change. But is there something else going on that we're not really talking about? Because, interestingly, the French Premier Ministre, Sébastien Lecornu, has revealed that 162 arrests were made between July the 6th and July the 27th for starting wildfires. In fact, 96% of the ignition of these wildfires are caused by humans. Now, some of that is accidental, some of that is carelessness, some of that is a barbecue when you shouldn't really be having a barbecue. Some of that is dropping, you know, bit of glass on the floor. It acts as a big magnifying glass. The other element to this is, well, no one cleans out the forest floor anymore. In La Porge in France, where the most devastation has been wrought because it was huge pine forests, and pine forests go up quite quickly with all of the sap which acts as an accelerant. The cover levels on the forest floor, the loam, the dried out brush that hadn't been cleared away because, you know, poor little bugs are going to, you know, shield bugs or something, got nowhere to live if you get rid of all that stuff. The cover levels on the forest floor have not been seen in tens of thousands of years. So yes, it's hot. And yes, maybe or maybe not, the climate is doing stuff. But do not think for 1 minute that that is all that's going on here. Let's speak to Ross Clark, author of Not Zero, How an Irrational Target Will Impoverish You, Help China, and Won't Even Save the Planet. Ross, it's funny, isn't it? As someone who's lived in multiple countries, hot countries, in places in sub-Saharan Africa, the south of India, not really having the forest fires over there, but this belt all across Europe with, 96% being caused by people are having a lot of wildfires at the moment. Can you explain more about what might be going on here?
Yes. I mean, it's certainly true that Europe is seeing hotter summers and that this year has been especially bad for wildfires in France and also in Spain. It's the worst year that France has had for wildfires. But to put it in a wider context, this is actually, satellite data shows that this is actually the least worst year for wildfires across Europe since 2012, since the records were, kept in this form since 2012. Globally, 2026 is a particularly low year for wildfires so far. There has been a downward trend in wildfires as measured in the acreage burnt per year all this century. So, you just look at those flames in Bordeaux region and so on, Madrid. It's terrible for those people who are caught up in those fires. Of course, it's terrible, but we seem to be losing the wider picture here, which is that actually wildfires are declining in spite of rising global temperatures. And you think, well, why does that happen? Because wildfires are essentially caused, the severity and frequency of wildfires is determined by a number of factors, of which weather is only one. Secondly, is the sources of ignition, and as we develop areas of countryside, that means more people around trees. It means a greater fire danger, more barbecues, more discarded glass bottles, more discarded cigarette ends and so on, which increases the danger around sort of cities. We're seeing this this week. Land use is also a very important factor in, and as you mentioned there, because we're clearing out forests less. Now, historically, wildfires have always been part of sort of a natural form of forest management. We used to have regular sort of small wildfires set off by lightning. And then, of course, we got very good at putting those small fires out. And what that did, that meant that the dead wood, brushwood, whatever, builds up on the forest floor. So when you eventually do have a fire and you can't put it out immediately, then it becomes a very much bigger fire. And that is the story we're seeing around Bordeaux. It's the story we saw in Los Angeles last year when we had those terrible fires in January. The amount of fuel available for wildfires is expanding thanks to the way we're managing land. And often that is a result of environmental policies in the States. We used to, the National Forest Service, they used to carry out controlled burning regularly, and then environmental laws came along and it made it so much more bureaucratic. It took about 5 years to get permission to have a controlled burn, and in the meantime all that fuel is building up on the forest floor, and then we had those dreadful fires. So.
I do wonder as well, Ross, and I've been doing research into this, but there is nothing evidential at the moment. I say at the moment because I try and pattern seek. Rather than jump to conclusions, I try and analyse and pattern seek. And what I have seen are these wildfires happening, it was California last year, happening closer to big urban areas. We've got one now in Suffolk near Sizewell B. It's always through the developed European countries and the Western world. It's not happening as much with the same level of headlines in other places. And I thought to myself, if I were a miscreant from a hostile regime and I wanted to create havoc in what I would consider to be an enemy state, all I have to do is put on a bally, go out towards a forest with a can of petrol and drop it. And I wonder, just because of the pattern of where these things seem to be taking place and the proximity to big urban areas, and I agree with what you're saying about, increased population, therefore the human triggers, the environmental policies as well. But if you were someone from the IRGC or the GRU who really wanted to, stick it to the Brits or stick it to the French, well, it's a very easy crime to commit.
Well, that is true. I have to say I haven't seen any evidence that these fires have been set by sort of foreign malignant states, if you like. But there has been tale from Italy of stories of sort of mafioso sending tying burning rags to the tails of cats and. Of course, they then run around in the forest and they're terrified, obviously, setting the place alight. And, it has been suggested that some people do this in order that they can then buy the land, burnt land, cheaply, discount price once it's been cleared of residential property and so on. But, I think a lot of fires are... There have been, obviously, arsonists have been implicated in some of these fires. I think probably most cases it's accidental, people not actually intending to set fires alight. But if you have more people in forested areas, you will get more forest fires. And of course, the other thing is we are planting more trees. Britain is now more forested than at any time since the 14th century because we've been planting trees for environmental reasons, and that is great, most of the time, but it obviously does create an extra fire hazard which has to be managed in some way, and at the moment I don't think it is being managed very well.
Talking about what people do seem keen on managing, it's trying to change the climate, and I wonder how fruitful that particular pursuit is going to be, certainly not when it comes to our industries and our economies. Now, Kemi Badenoch has turned around and said climate change is real, but says net zero by 2050 is fiction. Apparently, in a phone call with Donald Trump, Andy Burnham has promised to open up the North Sea, this despite the Labour Party banning new North Sea drilling. Do you think we've reached peak net zero now? Do you think the political establishment finally understand that this has been an act of national self-harm?
Well, I think it is gradually sinking in. I mean, for years we've been told by government, oh, we've cut our carbon emissions by 50%. And it's absolute tosh, really. That's just the territorial emissions. What we've been doing is we've been closing down a heavy industry, exporting our carbon emissions and many jobs and wealth with it. And the reality is that when you look at UK carbon emissions in a in a consumption basis, that is emissions around the world emitted in the cause of creating products and services for UK residents, actually our emissions are down just 15% since 1990. So, I mean, that just shows how far, how far we would have to go to get the world down to sort of net zero carbon emissions. It's just not going to happen by 2050. We just do not have the technology to do it. And any country which tries to do it, tries to force this target through, will end up like Britain. It will just try to fudge it by exporting its carbon emissions and impoverishing itself in the process.
What I don't understand about all of this is we bang on and on and on, don't we, about climate changes. We've got to do that. We've got this ridiculous story that the NHS are having to cancel blood tests because samples will degrade in hot conditions because there are all these rules inside the NHS. The NHS Net Zero Building Standard, published in 2023, a document that probably should be thrown into a wildfire, stating that mechanical cooling should be minimised as far as possible to meet thermal comfort criteria as well as reduce energy demands. How about, NHS, that your priority is making sure blood samples can be stored effectively to give precise results, because that should be your focus, right? Human health. But instead, no, we've got to fight the magical weather instead. For me, it feels like we're trying to stop the sea instead of building a better boat to navigate it. Why aren't we looking into solutions of changing, if we're going to all, sit around and clap for climate change, why aren't we looking at solutions to adapting ourselves to this new era of weather, rather than trying to somehow magically destroy all the things that otherwise once upon a time normally functioned, to bow down at the god of this neo-religion?
Yeah, well, NHS has been forced to cancel blood tests because the samples were going off because they haven't got adequate cool conditions to store them in. And why haven't they? Because, as you say, there's a sort of war against air conditioning, not just in the NHS, but in the housing supply generally. You have to jump through great hoops if you want to install air conditioning in a new building. You've got to sort of try and do it, keep the building cool by other means and so on. And you think, well, what is the great thing against air conditioning? I mean, Ed Miliband wants to cover is covering the countryside in these solar panels. When do they generate most of their energy? On sunny days in summer. I mean, that is when you want the air conditioning. So that's actually a good match between, solar panels and the consumption in the form of air conditioning. Otherwise, you've got this big problem of surplus power being generated by solar panels on sunny afternoons when otherwise there's not much energy demand. So I simply do not understand this great thing against air conditioning, and I think it inevitably increases carbon emissions because people then drive around in their cars to keep cool because they do have air conditioning, and it seems completely ridiculous.
It's a madness. The fact that, vital medical samples are having to be binned because, we can't have fridges in the NHS for, blood samples because weather. I mean, it's just this balmy. Ross, thank you ever so much. It's always so good catching up with you. We're going to be taking a short break now, but before we do that, let's do our housekeeping. If you want to get in touch with the programme, it'd be fantastic to hear from you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to dial if you want to register your interest. We'll give you a call back. You just leave your name, your number, and what you want to talk about. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number to send a text message. If you're going to do that, write the word talk before you text. I am back with Big Phil, the one and only Mr. Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer, to talk everything geopolitics just after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, I know that I sit here joining dots and coming up with Alex theories, but I just think it's pragmatism. I think it's rather sanguine to look at things going on and say, could there be another narrative? And it's brilliant that a former senior military intelligence officer is with me now to test my theory, which is wildfires. If we know there have been 162 arrests in France over the last 3 weeks about the fires going on near Bordeaux, my little head was like, well, of those 162, might one or two of them be miscreants from foreign countries?
So I need my tinfoil hat on.
Tinfoil hat.
now.
Oh, yeah, we
Yes,
love that, don't we? Let's get it back on. It's been a while.
Theoretically, it could be. You know, they're naturally occurring, but given the amount of disruption that there is, and given the way that the GRU, the Russian First Directorate of their intelligence services, would like to cause further disruption across Europe, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that they are behind starting some of them to deliberately cause the disruption that we're seeing.
Grey zone warfare. Let us talk about, rather than grey zone warfare, actual warfare. Andy Burnham. There's a sort of, he's doing a big speech in Barrow and Furness now about our nuclear investments, our nuclear submarines. We'll get onto that in a moment. Very important to discuss. Yet he has not really been able to commit to anything significant when it comes to defence spending. Of course, John Healey was the defence minister who resigned over this issue when the defence investment programme basically failed to stump up the government failed to stump up the 10 to 15 billion extra that we know we need for our armed forces. He said, right, that's it, I can't do this job anymore. Well, he is now Chancellor. And yet, of all the things that Andy Burnham isn't talking about, it's talking about this topic, where the money's going to come from, what it's going to be spent on. I just feel like 3.5% of GDP on defence by 2035 doesn't even touch the edge.
It doesn't touch the edge. Now, there's a couple of bits to it. Andy Burnham came in saying that he would meet our NATO commitments. NATO commitments are 3% of GDP by 2030, with an aim to get to 3.5% of GDP by 2035. But he's not committing on that 3%. So he is, something that he said he would commit to, he seems to be not going certain on. He hasn't said he's not going to yet, but he's turning the wheel for this first U-turn that's in there. That sends a very bad message to our allies, because the UK used to be one of the leading countries financing NATO's military commitment. We're now at the bottom of the league, and it sends a very poor message to Vladimir Putin, who's going, the UK is weak, they are not interested in that, and therefore I'm going to try and exploit that a little bit more. And the other things that he's coming out with, this announcement of the $5.5 billion for our nuclear deterrent submarine. This is the new Dreadnought series. The finances behind that were first approved in 2016. The Defence Investment Plan published under Keir Starmer turned around and cemented this $5.5 billion that Andy Burnham is announcing today.
Claiming it as his own.
The additional apprentices at Barrow and Furness were announced under the last Conservative government. So he's repackaged announcements that have already been made and saying that they're brand new. If this is the flavour for what he's doing in defence, we're in trouble.
Wow. That just makes him a charlatan, in my mind. If he's just announcing things that were announced 10 years ago and pretending it's some brand new project, that's pretty disgusting. But, what I don't understand about the United Kingdom's approach to defence is it would have a huge impact on us economically. People talk about the military-industrial complex as if it's a bad thing. It's blooming wonderful when you've got mass joblessness and you've got some of the best universities in the world.
Yeah, very much so. Whenever I got out of the military, I went and worked in the steel industry. The steel industry, we got into the defence market. That was the challenge that was given to me. But we made lots of components for the rail market, for everything else. We employed people in some of the poorest areas of the country, up in Leeds, in Sheffield, up in the Wear Valley. Not just employing people there, but those people living in the local communities then kept the local communities going by going out and buying things in local businesses. Everything from my favourite, bacon rolls in the cafe, through to keeping local shops going. People don't understand that the investment in defence isn't buying a weapon that's going to go out and kill people. There are so many other bits that are in there that produce so much good that there is into local communities, and then good for society, because the LED lights that everyone is jumping up and down on saying we have to go LED lights because it's green to get your green certifications was invented by a defence organisation in the UK.
And let's also focus in on the word defence, not attack. Defend, which is something that this government seems to be very bad at doing, successive governments. Let's talk now about attack. I was sitting outside my local pub yesterday and there was that noise, the sort of screaming, bassy, jet fuel powered noise, and we all stopped.
The Furford.
Yeah,
scream.
we all stopped, and where everyone just in the pub garden went, "It's Millie, it's Millie, it's Millie," as it's military. We all get up, we're looking around, where are they, where are they? And then they came screaming over, and we could see they were coming back in.
Yep.
And I was like, right, they've just gone and delivered a payload on Iran, and indeed they did. Indeed they did. But this has been going on now as someone who witnesses these beautiful flying birds coming in and out on a regular basis. It's been going on for a sustained period of time, but the needle doesn't seem to be moving. So what are these latest rounds of strikes? What is the approach now? Because we had a period where there had been a sort of accidental ceasefire, that no one had bombed anyone in a while. And the IRGC were the ones going, that's a bit boring, isn't it? Let's have a prod. Let's chuck some, missiles in the direction of US air bases in the Middle East and force Trump to re-engage. Or, we haven't been problematic for a while. Oh, see those 3 oil tankers going through the Strait of Hormuz, get them. And it seems to me we've just ended with this sort of little cat and mouse back and forth that isn't going anywhere.
Yep. That's 100% where we are at the moment. Donald Trump is being driven by setting the conditions for his midterm elections coming up in the autumn. The Iranians are being driven by hey, we can sit back and wait. We can wait 5 years. We can wait 10 years. We don't care because we know that you've got different priorities. And this is where, when Donald Trump made the decision to attack Iran, and I think that was the right decision to do, it had to happen at some stage, he should have continued and followed through with it and not just stopped whenever he got rid of the first tier of government and the first tier of the IRGC. He should have continued until all tiers of government and all military tiers had been completely and utterly obliterated, and then be prepared to follow that up with activity in certain parts of the ground, not invade Iran per se and put troops on, that would then take over Tehran and elsewhere, because that would be completely disastrous and would never work. But once he stopped and allowed the IRGC to then go into their plans where they put their dispersed command and control out, and they're now down into little bits and they're all operating independently, then he's opened up Pandora's box and he just wants out of it.
Can he push stuff back into that box, though? Because that is the big question. I mean, where does the world go from here at this stage? Because he keeps saying, look, if you defy the negotiations for this peace treaty, I'm going to, bomb you back into the Middle Ages. But then he kind of doesn't. Yeah. It's piecemeal bits and bobs. My understanding is there's a nuclear facility, is it Pickaxe Mountain or something like that in Iran, that in theory could be a target. I don't know whether that's being struck. But, is there a little bit of leeway here for him to really turn the volume up and do as he has warned?
To turn the volume up, he needs to be bold. The Americans have got the capability to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. They could completely deny the areas that Iran is using to influence the Strait of Hormuz through its IRGC military forces going out and attacking into that. But it would take US troops on the ground. Now, they've got the military wherewithal to do it. But that would then tie them into something that the American public would not accept. That puts Trump in this dilemma when it comes up to his midterms. He's been driven by domestic political situation. He's put himself into a geopolitical environment that he thought he could control, and he's got that thought wrong. I know his military have got their military planning right. They've achieved all the military objectives at the minute, but there wasn't that geopolitical end state. And this is where very often politicians don't get their end states right, or they change the end states after they've given the initial military direction. The same thing we saw happened in Afghanistan. The same thing happened in Iraq. This is not uncommon for Western leaders to be to change the goalposts as you're mid-game, and often change the shape of the ball and the rules as well, not necessarily telling those that are playing exactly what you're doing.
What do you think Iran's next move's going to be? Because, I think the same critique could be applied in parts to Ukraine, the sort of doing just about enough rather than not doing enough entirely. In terms of this has become a war of attrition, where is our end state there?
No, Ukraine is completely different. Ukraine has got the initiative at the minute. They're controlling what's happening at the tactical level to a greater or lesser degree, but they're having the impact at the operational level and causing the Russians real harm. Nothing is ever going to be quick. So the trouble is in our environment today where we're driven by that, people want things to happen tomorrow so it can affect the headlines. No, we're talking years. And it's the same with the conflict in Iran. The Iranians can sit back and wait. They know that Donald Trump's going to be driven by his electoral timetable. He's not going to be in power forever. They've got the world by a very delicate area.
Curlies.
Yes, the Strait of Hormuz, and they are now exercising control over that, and they like the fact that they can do that, and that's something they're going to continue to do. As long as they want, and we've now opened a real issue for the world.
Why is more of the world not stepping in? Because this affects the whole world. That is the most important bit of sort of maritime transit, frankly, geopolitically. So it's having an impact on multiple other countries, and everyone's just sort of going back, going, so what's America going to do about it then?
Well, again, a lot of Western countries are in difficult political positions. They're driven by their parliaments or their presidential timeframes. And they weren't involved in the planning of it beforehand, so they'd be coming in to try and play catch-up. And they've had their fingers burnt in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and don't want to get into that because they know their electorate will never support it again. And that's the real dilemma that there is here. They knew that Iran needed to be dealt with, but nobody's willing to stand up and deal with them. Donald Trump did it because he was supporting Netanyahu. He got his political thinking and planning wrong.
Well, there we go. We'll have to wait and see, but at least I'm enjoying my own personal air display most nights. Philip, thank you ever so much. It's always great to have your company. We're going to say goodbye to Philip, but not to you. After the break, we're catching up with Reform UK councillor Darren Grimes on all the stories of the day. That's just after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back. 1 hour is under our belt, 2 are ahead of us, and we're going to get stuck into them with zeal and enthusiasm, vim and vigour, because as per usual, same stories, different day. Well, no, there's always developments. I mean, the developments now is that custom-built dinghies. I mean, honestly, they could make top trumps of these things. You know where they've got that, they've got like a big unit somewhere in Kent where these dinghies are all sort of like housed. You could actually make top trumps cards, couldn't you? You know, dinghy 1, dinghy 2, how many they're carrying now. Apparently, the latest ones being built in the back streets of China, they're longer than a double-decker bus, and earning the people traffickers £300,000 a boat. Oh, anyway, in they come. And, yeah, Andy Burnham, what's he said about it? The plan's working. Really? I'm not sure that these front pages look like a plan that is working. And he didn't speak about it, did he? He's not mentioned immigration or illegal immigration. Of course, the legacy media channels aren't even asking him about it because they know he hasn't got the answers and they want Andy for us to be given an easy ride. But this is critical. This is life and death. This is a massive homegrown terror plot that's going to explode. We know that IRGC say we're bringing operatives in via those routes. I say it all the time until I'm blue in the face. We know that terror organisations are now getting a vast amount of their income not from the illegal drugs trade, you know, the old opium poppies of the last century. No, 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 no. People trafficking makes them a lot more dosh. There is so much evidence now of how dangerous this is, not controlling this, how dangerous to our own population. The word invasion is etymologically correct. It is succinct. These people are invading. And frankly speaking, look at the video footage that's been made by Chris Phillips of the French gendarmerie, the police over in Normandy. Just, you know, they were asked, what are you doing? Well, we've been told we've got to be nice to them. We've got to give them life jackets. We give you money to police those beaches because they are your beaches. And if we were to suddenly send our own police or our own army to Normandy, then, well, the French might not look too kindly on that. So we say, right, we will give you the money. You use your own people, your own equipment, you know, your own rules, but do it, stop it. Here's the giant cheque. And yet, they're not. They're enabling it. At this point, France may as well tie a big red ribbon around those dinghies and say, avec amour, cher Angleterre, here's a lovely little cadeau from you, hot off the dunes of Calais. Enjoy. Love President Macron. And yet our own blimmin' Prime Minister just seems to think that this story don't exist. Well, it does. And the right-wing press are going to remind him on a regular basis that the people of Britain not just expect, but demand that you address this issue. Let's speak now to Darren Grimes, Reform UK Councillor, Deputy Leader, in fact, of Durham County Council. How are you, my Darrens?
Very good. All the better for seeing you.
No, I'm always happy to see you, my love, but I'm not happy to see these front pages. I'm not happy to learn that 1,000 illegal immigrants came for the UK as French cops basically wished them bon voyage.
I agree, Alex. And do you know what really struck me is that yesterday and the day before we had the news break that actually the Sudanese migrant, illegal as he was, went with knives outside of a primary school. Another Sudanese migrant was responsible for killing the mother, Rhiannon Sky White, in Walsall. You know, the way that these things are happening, and it's the same people from the same countries committing similar kinds of atrocities. And the government turned round, as you rightly just identified, Alex, and they said, say, well, the problem is that people just don't understand our plan. Well, actually, we do understand the plan. Burnham can say it's working for as long as he likes. There's a queue outside the job centre that's working much more than he actually is. Nobody standing on that beach actually believes a word he's saying about stopping the boats. Neither do the gangs. They've priced in a Burnham premiership. That isn't border enforcement. It's basically a day out at the seaside. And the French police are stood there talking to journalists saying, well, we have orders not to stop the migrants getting into the boats and setting off for Britain. We've sent them nigh on £1 billion. You've got 1,000 people charging on down that beach, boats launching in broad daylight, and the French stood there watching it unfold like the sort of spectators at a village fete or stomping down the Champs-Élysées. The whole thing's a total joke. And the only thing, actually, that anybody intercepted that morning, I would proffer, Alex, is a French policeman's lunch break. You know, I find the whole thing so disgusting because actually it is people, our people, being put in real risk and danger. And I don't care what I get called for saying that. I mean, the rhetoric that you will have seen over recent days after the Berlin Pride attack, do not say this is down to immigration. You cannot argue it is down to anything but immigration. I'm losing my mind, Alex. I feel like the rest of the country, I'm going insane, and it feels like our political class can't quite catch up to us.
I don't want to hear the word refugee ever again in my life. I don't care. You're not a refugee. You're a crook, you're a criminal, you're a terrorist, you're a murderer, you're a wannabe rapist, you're an economic chancer. You are not a blimmin' refugee. End of. So there's the latest, OK, is that 3 migrants have been found dead on board a boat in the English Channel off the coast of Dunkirk Thursday morning. That's according to the French Coast Guard. Now, a leftist would go, oh, you see these poor people, they're dying on these boats. We've got to escort them in and make sure that they've got a hotel room and that they can have lessons in balloon shaping and that they have access to a good dentist and a doctor and a hairdresser and that they get to play computer games and they get translators and free travel passes and they can go to the local wildlife centre for free. A rightist would go, I wonder why those 3 migrants were dead on board a boat. They were probably stabbed up by the other violent monsters also on that boat.
Yeah, or trampled to death, Alex. You know, this is what happens. The men get on there, they pack themselves on, they are physically stronger than women, and women and children actually have ended up being trampled on these boats. Now, I don't know about you, but anyone that does trample someone to death or stab someone up in order to gain their place on the boat, well, we don't want those sorts of people in this country, do we? And they're not seeking the worst vestiges of war and persecution. They're seeking or fleeing from France. And it's because the French won't entertain them in the same way that we do as far as bed, board and benefits are concerned. I find the whole thing so totally disgusting. More than 900 people cross in 7 days of Burnham's premiership. That ain't control. You cannot tell us that's control. That's gaslighting. It's uncontrolled immigration with a slightly gentler throttle on it. That's what we're seeing right now. And the French police, they're saying it clear as day, clear as a bell. So if Burnham isn't listening to that, he is lying to the British public. I don't think you can put it in any other way.
These people, I want to ask you something as a deputy leader of a county council. So I was reading the other day in the local press about how my lovely leafy area is going to get a load of new homes, not right next to me. Good, thanks. I already did my research before I bought my house that wouldn't be possible. But the other side of town, building 3,000 odd new homes. Now, on the surface of it, great. We need a lot of new houses, young professionals moving to, you know, a respectfully built estate, you know, the other side of town. Great, well, you know, it'll help the local economy. The pubs will be busier. There'll be more people knocking about, buying things and eating in the restaurants. Except something tells me that of the 3,000, I don't know what percentage, but some of them are bound to end up being ring-fenced for some rando who's decided to break into the country that we don't know who he is or what his intent is. And yeah, they might not be in the fields opposite me, But when I next go to the town centre in a few years' time, they're going to be wandering around there, aren't they? They're going to be changing the complexion of my community, and I'm not happy about it. I'm not happy about it because a lot of these men, if I walk past them in the street in town, whereas my normal neighbours at the moment give me a cheery hello. Oh, hello, Alex, how are you? Did you see there's a new baby cow in the field? You know, that's our chat. These ones will be following me around, you know, whistling and hissing and, you know, making eyes at me and waiting to see if I might leave my handbag unguarded for a second. And I'm sorry if that makes me sound like a xenophobe, but I am scared of them. I'm scared of these people. I don't know who they are. And I want to ask you, Operation Scatter, how bad is it in Durham? How many HMOs are you having forced upon you? Can you push back against it?
So, Alex, we actually ultimately don't know how many HMOs there are in Durham because the Home Office don't tell us. They say that actually that's protected and they can't release that information.
You're deputy leader
Absolutely,
of the county
yes, and
council,
I don't know.
and you are being blocked from finding out how many HMOs there are in your county.
That's absolutely right, because these are private pieces of accommodation, so private accommodation that's been co-opted and changed into a HMO. Until next month, they have not needed planning permission on those properties. So Mears, which is the Home Office contractor, comes in, redevelops a property, puts 6 men in there, and they've not needed planning permission until we've actually changed the planning rules from next month. And I get residents calling me, Alex, in floods of tears, saying that they are absolutely terrified of the prospect of what might be moving in next door to them. And I have felt utterly powerless for the last year. We are making changes. We are putting in place every instrument at our disposal to protect residents from these migrant HMOs. But ultimately, yes, the Home Office is playing fast and loose with the truth. And it is down to the fact that they don't want people to know the extent to which the problem actually goes into more deprived areas like ours in County Durham. It is a postcode lottery, and if you are in a more deprived postcode, well, you ain't going to win the lottery anytime soon, Alex. That's the truth of it.
This is terrifying. We don't know who these men are. We don't even know where they come from. We don't know what their intention is. We don't know where they're being put. And all the powers that be that might be able to at least create some sort of protective net for the local population. Well, maybe the HMO shouldn't be there because there's a nursery right next door. Or perhaps we shouldn't have all of these undocumented men because there's a girls' school up the way. Or, you know, is it on a street near you? I'm about to buy a house. Is it going to depreciate in value within a month because all of a sudden there's, you know, 5 HMOs on this street with Lord knows who in them? You're not even being given the basic information that you as a local authority would require in order to deliver the services that protect and serve your own constituents. You're not even being given.
No, that is absolutely true. You know, we have 11,000 people on a housing waiting list, 3,000 of them properties available. So you can see the problem there, right? And at the same time, the government is literally buying up through a contractor private properties in order to put illegal migrants in. So I've got residents saying, how on God's earth is it fair and proportionate for these people who have no right to be here to gain access to properties quicker than I'll be able to, despite the fact I may well be homeless or in a situation such as domestic violence and need to get out of a property, whatever it might be, Alex. And I get complaints about me and my conduct as a councillor through the councillor code, saying that I've breached it from opposition politicians for talking about these issues as plainly as I am with you right now. But I will never, ever apologise in a month of Sundays for doing this, because I think it is wrong, I think it is unjust, and I think it is a damn disgrace to the memory of those brave men and boys who went out and fought for this country, only for us to turn it into a rivals lounge for illegal men from Sudan and Eritrea and elsewhere to come and commit some of the worst atrocities that we've ever seen committed to women and girls. So yeah, Alex, you are right to be angry. I'm as angry as you are too, and I dare say all of your viewers are as well.
Councillor code, you can shove it up someone's... And as for codes of honour and all the rest of it, a government's first job is to protect its people. To me, it seems like it is willfully, wantonly harming them. I cannot fathom what is going on. What can we do about this? I mean, is there any way that you are looking as, you know, a deputy leader of a county council of legal action? You know, maybe some sort, I don't know, somewhere where you can get your residents together and sue the government for this act of vandalism on their lives, on their security, on their culture, on their communities? What? I mean, are you looking there? Sort of, you were newly elected first time, what, about a year ago?
A year ago, yeah.
And so it's probably been a bit of a steep learning curve, and you're learning, I suppose, what you've got in your toy box, you know, what tools you can use to fight the case for your constituents. Have you got any plans of how you can take the battle to the government over this?
So, there's a planning directive called Article 4, and that's coming in force in the whole of County Durham next month. We've had to wait 12 months for it to come online. Otherwise, we would have received a lot of legal challenge. That is the legal challenge against the authority for wanting to protect its own people. But I digress, Alex. Ultimately, what this will mean is that they have to apply for planning permission to convert properties to HMOs. Now, I cannot legally predetermine a planning application, but I can say that as a reform council, I dare say that they will have their views as a planning committee on homes with multiple occupation for migrants. Now, as well as that, we at full council passed a motion last month to call on the government to release the data that tells us where these HMOs are. I've also been at countless scores of police and community action meetings where I've actually said, there's a HMO going to be here. I'm telling you right now, if this goes ahead, the residents in there, they will not be safe. And I don't say that with any glee. I do not say that because I endorse that kind of action, but it just simply will be the case. And Alex, it is because people feel utterly desperate, powerless, and that the ballot box is fundamentally broken. Because time and again, they've voted for stronger and robust controls on migration and for them to have a say. That's been denied from them. And I tell you, when Andy Burnham speaks about devolution and power being devolved as close to the individual as possible, well, come and tell that to my residents in County Durham, you snake oil salesman.
There you go. I think that was a perfect way to end the interview. Or he might flutter his eyelashes and talk about his dad and be a normal person and wear a T-shirt. I can see the gaslighting from a mile off. I'm used to it. Regular daily occurrence now, isn't it? Darren, keep fighting the good fight. All power to your elbow. That's real democracy. That is real politics. That is real accountability. Not that anyone in the number 10 North would know what that looks like. OK, you want to get in touch? Please do. 03444 999 1000 is the number to call. It's your normal network rate. It'd be great to do some calls just after this next break. 87222 is the number to send a text message to. Write the word talk before you write your message. If you're more of a WhatsApper, we got you covered. You can send a WhatsApp message to 03444 999 1000. You can even leave a voice note. Don't send any pictures because we can't really do anything about that. But all other forms of media, most welcome. OK, right, we are going to take a short break, put the kettle on and hopefully be reading your messages and maybe chatting with some of you just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
All right, let us dive deep into the delectation that is all of your messages. Alex, I'd love for you, Peter Cardwell and Kevin O'Sullivan to be head of government. Pat, I'm not sure you know what you're wishing for there. I join you to help throw out the illegals. You're a true English person. Well, that much is true. I've done my family tree and I just basically don't seem to leave anywhere. Like, I've gone back to 1530 and we're still in the same little pokey village near Stroud. And I thought to myself, well, either we owned the land or we were illiterate people who worked it. I have a feeling, given when I went through all of the grave records in the local churches, that we were the latter. But there you go, definitely true English. Alex, been watching Talk this morning and it's just so depressing being British right now. We have a political class and a government inept in protecting its own people, and what's worse, they have no intention to. But why? That's the bigger question, asks Lee. I know, it just doesn't make sense. I really cannot understand how we're in a situation where, like I said, Margaret Thatcher, Winston Churchill, even Tony Blimmin Blair would have probably done more than the last few prime ministers have done. This whole idea of, oh, I don't know what we can do about tiny little boats crossing the channel. I mean, they might be the size of 2 double-decker buses now, but they're still just giant balloons with some wastrels on. Very easy to stop, right? You and I both know how. But I don't understand the mindset of people who just think that this crisis in no way, shape or form can be dealt with. I'm telling you, at some point, someone out there is going to become a vigilante. Let's be honest, if all the migrants went down to Dover to sail back to France, we wouldn't stop them. No, I'd be down there myself pushing the boats. I'd be like, go on then, that way to Calais, enjoy. Alex, why are we still sending money to France when they're obviously allowing this? They should cut off funds until they do what we're paying them for, and also stop all foreign aid to any countries that refuse to accept migrants back. Well, Leanne, that would be logical, wouldn't it? That would be uncommon common sense. The thing is, because we're sending money to France... Now, let me explain something. When I come into work and I sit and do this show for 3 hours, there is a show rate, and at the end of every month I send an invoice, and, you know, people in the finance department have to pay me for the work that I've done. If I didn't do the work and they'd paid me, well, they wouldn't have me back anymore. The contract would be cancelled. If I did the work and they didn't pay me, well, they're going to hear from my lawyers. So if we're paying money to France, that involves some form of contractual arrangement, OK? It wasn't a charity check. It was money to provide a service that clearly is not being provided. So why aren't we going and knocking on the door of the Élysée Palace, dragging Macron out and saying, you see, the European courts in Strasbourg, remember those? You love those, don't you? Fancy a go in there? Why aren't we doing anything? But there's no tough talk against France. There's been no crisis meeting. There's been no you are summoned to Downing Street. Explain yourself. You know, Interior Minister of France, get over here right now, because we've got video footage of your police pushing the boats out to sea, and that ain't what we're paying you for. We scared of the French now, for crying out loud. Blimmin' heck. Do you know what we should do, actually? We should go back through the annals of history and find that horrible bit of sort of Renaissance legislation or whatever it was, when it was Mary I gave up Calais. We used to own that. And then we should be like, do you know what? I don't think that was fair back then. Let's take it back. And then we could control it, just turn Calais into one giant deportation centre. Wouldn't have to cross the blimmin' La Manche then, would they? Anyway, there's a thought. Let's speak to Caroline in London. Good morning, Caroline.
Oh, hi, Alex. Thanks so much for taking my call. Can I make a few points, please?
Yeah.
Got so much going on in my head. After watching what happened this morning on Jeremy's show, what can I say? I mean, I'm not surprised. You know, what was the point of saving our country from the Nazis? I mean, I think about all those poor men that fought for this country. But the point is, they're not going to stop the boats. I haven't got the answers. I think there's so much we don't know. There's obviously a plan to ruin this country, whether it's, you know, you can talk about the Fabians and whatever. I don't think any prime minister at the moment is running this country. I think they're getting instructions from the EU or or the United Nations or whatever. But what we can talk all day long. I love talk. I love you. I love Jeremy. I love Peter Carr. We can talk every day, Alex. What are we going to do as the British people? Because when they have the next budget, my God help us. Every penny that you spend on your tax, we know where it's going. Corruption doesn't even touch the surface. And what really concerns me is that Kemi, all she keeps saying is, I'll work with Labour. Kemi, the Tories, Restore, Reform, need to create a coalition. Otherwise, we are going to get a left-wing government in the next election, and that's it, done, finished. And I'm terrified, Alex. I want to know your views on it. We can talk all day long. What are we going to do?
Well, this is what is so perilous about all of that, because all we technically have within the bounds of the law as citizens of this country, as denizens of our towns and cities, is the ballot box. And yet we also know that the left wing especially are not keen on that, are they? They tried to overturn the Brexit referendum result. They lie in their manifestos. They gaslight us. They tried to cancel local elections. Andy Burnham barely faced a ballot, did he? 20,000 people. That's how many votes he got to be Prime Minister. That's 0.03% of the population. He doesn't seem a big fan of accountability in the franchise either, does he? So this is the thing. What can we do? Unless we get a strong right-wing government, and I don't care about the personalities in the politics. I just do it. Just get on and save this country. We're at the 11th hour, and yet they will use every single machination, every single trick. We've seen it happen across the EU, forming super coalitions to have a vote against Rassemblement National in France with Macron's snap election, overturning the election of Georgescu in Russia because the EU decided they didn't like the result, and they said, oh, well, look how popular on TikTok. Russia must have done that. No, it was the EU themselves seeding those accounts so they could turn around and pretend it was Russia doing it. I'm not even making this up. This is where we've got to right now. Democracy, or particularly the lawfare, the persecution against the populist parties, who are the only parties doing what the people want, or proposing that they would do what the people want, hence populism, people-focused, people-centric. The powers that be, the political establishment, the elites are doing everything they can to prevent those people getting anywhere near power. So even our vote isn't worth anything. So, Caroline, I don't know is the answer. I don't know anymore what we can do, which is alarming. And this is why there are so many people out there saying when you reach a critical moment, the juxtaposition of crises, failing governments, this big divide, the gulf between those who lead the country and those who live in it, and the failure of democracy itself, the outcome is usually when it gets to a point that the ordinary men and women say, extreme times require extreme measures, and that might start with a little bit of vigilantism, and it would soon accelerate. And I don't want to see that, Caroline. I really don't. Believe you me, I'm not advocating for that at all. I think that is a terrible, extremely dangerous state of affairs that gets out of control very, very quickly. But I don't know. You said, what can we do? I just sit here and talk to you guys, so you kind of feel like we're in it together, that at least we've got each other. But other than that, without actually breaking the law and being carted off down to Clink myself for, I don't know, inciting something, I don't know. I don't know what we can do.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
You know, you're talking about the vote. Isn't it interesting? This Andy Burnham coup, which I have to say is brilliant how they did it. Probably how did he know he was going to win? I mean, come on, you're right.
Right, before Makerfield, the sort of agreement to turn number 10 north in that building was, you know, the ink was already dry on the contract, is what you're suggesting. Look, like you said, they are extremely crafty, is a nice way of putting it, when it comes to fiddling with democracy. And it's not just the Labour Party. The Conservatives have been doing this for ages as well. They're also at it. We've had multiple changes of Prime Minister and they kept wanting to swap out the person at the top. But at the end of the day, the sort of repeat pattern, the rich seam that runs through the lot of this is that democracy is dead in this country. We don't matter. They hate us. They hate us. We're an inconvenience to them and their global plans. Caroline, thank you ever so much. We're going to have to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking about the fact that Ed Miliband is under pressure to accuse China of genocide. Labour has failed to come up with a decisive strategy to confront the oppression of the Uyghurs, say campaigners. Tell you what, though, they did come up with a decisive strategy to cosy up to Beijing as much as possible, particularly in the Department of Energy. It'll be interesting to see how things might change or not. Now Ed Miliband is our Foreign Secretary. We're discussing that with Andrew Fox just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, knock knock. Who's there? Beijing. What do you want, Beijing? I don't know, to take over your country, to infiltrate all of your delicate infrastructure, to spy on you, to build a mega embassy right above the quantum computing pipeline in the City of London, maybe to have kill switches in all of your electric vehicles and solar panels, and also to extract as much money from you as possible in the fake news fight against net zero while you industrialise. Always good to have friends like those in China. But apparently they are the best friends of the Labour Party. I have never seen so many ministers within the first year of a government being in office to take so many special trips over to Beijing to glad hand with their mates, the other communists that side of the world, and to sign up little deals and, you know, oh, yeah, get all your students over here in our universities. No intellectual property we don't mind giving away. And that's what's been going on for a long time, particularly when it comes to energy and net zero, because without the help of China, we probably wouldn't have solar panels. Solar panels that, I don't know, might well be being made in certain provinces in, let's call them labour camps or correctional facilities, educational centres, no doubt, the likes of which are stuffed full of the minority population of China, which are the Uyghurs, which China's not a big fan of. So what is Ed Miliband going to do about it now he's Foreign Secretary? Of course, he's needed those factories to build all the solar panels for his, repapering over the beautiful green belt of Britain, arable land with, plastic. But silicon, in fact. But what's he going to do, foreign policy-wise, when it comes to China? Let's speak to Andrew Fox, Senior Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. Andrew, it's always so good catching up with you. Oh, it's not like this is a new story. We know that Uyghurs are persecuted in China as part of a whole, hodgepodge of pretty horrible things that China gets up to. But this government have been very much in the pocket of Beijing since coming into office. Do you think that there'll be any change of direction under Ed Miliband? Now he's Foreign Minister.
Well, it's been a long decade plus of us getting into bed with the Chinese. This was reached a bit of a high point under the Osborne-Cameron governments as well. So this is firmly across both houses. But I think, as ever, Labour are discovering that it's far easier to gob off loudly when in opposition than it is to make actual decisions when you're in power. And I think that's what they're going to come up against pretty solidly. Now, whether it's a genocide or not doesn't really matter. That's for the international courts. It's beyond question that the treatment of the Uyghurs is deeply questionable, deeply unpleasant. Lots of sterilisation, forced labour camps, people being disappeared. This is really unpleasant totalitarian dictatorship stuff. And it seems fairly straightforward to me that if we are going to espouse values as a country, then it makes logical sense that we should make sure our international procurement follows those values. So as a state, we shouldn't be buying things from Chinese labour camps, for example. As a final point, though, I would say what China are really good at is making quite good stuff incredibly cheap that undercuts the other things. And so the much harder question, I think, is for the businesses in the UK, how you buy ethically when you are trying to fight a bottom line and China and Chinese goods present you the best bang for buck. That's very tricky to get around.
That ukulele-playing, tree-hugging, all-round good guy Ed Miliband likes to make a lot of capital from his moral superiority. How many times have I heard that nasally voice going, because it's the right thing to do? Was it the right thing to do, then, as Energy Minister Ed Miliband, to buy solar panels from supply chains that when the Helena Kennedy Centre for International Justice published a report on Uyghur forced labour and global solar supply chains 5 years ago, it found 90 Chinese and international companies whose supply chains were linked to forced labour, 11 companies engaged in forced labour transfers. I wonder how many of Ed Miliband's solar panels have been made with the blood, sweat and tears of people in concentration camps, essentially.
Yeah, he's looking like an absolutely hypocritical buffoon, as is so often with this government. It must be said. There's a real downside to student union politics, and I think the really big downside is that it is absolutely empty of any meaning or any gravitas or any really deep thinking that grapples with the problems we need. And so when you're dealing with everything on a superficial basis, you say we need cheap solar panels. Let's buy cheap solar panels, and you don't think about where they come from, and you don't think about how that might conflict with other values that you hold, because you're too busy showing that you want to do the right thing because you're a good person, and that's really where this falls over for me. It's that there's no thought behind this. It's kind of a knee-jerk, kind of wet leftist kind of do-goodery that really actually does far more harm than good.
Let's talk about the other risks posed by China, because every now and then we take our eye off the ball, we get distracted, we talk about Russia, we talk about Iran, and China's there busying away in the background, helping Iran, helping Russia, no doubt, with their own supply chains. And it's funny that there has been, I would say, a pretty big volte-face when it comes from this government's approach to China compared to previous governments who are a little bit, not entirely, but a little bit more aligned with, let's say, the American Mike Pompeo school of thought, which is do not enable China, they are not your friend. Do not allow them into critical infrastructure, etc. How at risk, how exposed are we, especially because of this government?
Well, look, it's very much the case that China is a malign actor who will inevitably try and infiltrate where they can. Look, they want global economic domination. They do that by flexing their military muscles in their own backyard in the South China Sea. They do it in the third and developing worlds by creating a dependency on Chinese infrastructure. So what they do is called the Belt and Road Initiative. They throw money at a developing country to build them ports and roads, and then China has control of those ports and roads. And if that country doesn't do what China want them to do, they have the ability to switch off their critical infrastructure. So when you go to places like Kenya, you can see the roads are being built, all of them by Chinese diggers. So it's called sharp power, and that's how China operates in that part of the world. And with us, what they do is they undercut our economy. They undercut our industry. They provide cheaper goods than we can provide. So they drive our businesses out of business. We're now seeing this with AI as well. There's a huge flight of capital from American AI companies just this week because cheap Chinese AI models are undercutting them, which means that they might not make the profits they're expected to make. And so you get a flight from the stock market in those American companies. So this is their tactic across the board to undermine us. And that, of course, goes hand in hand with financial espionage, economic espionage, technological espionage, intellectual property theft, and, of course, that widespread bugging, tapping, you name it, spying on us as a country and how we operate. So China is a pervasive threat across multiple different levers, which does, of course, make it incredibly hard to counter, especially, as I said, when you come up against that economic imperative that they sell good enough stuff really cheap, and that's very, very attractive.
I mean, China engages in mass economic warfare, essentially, against the world at large, really. But what about militarily? Because China has gone to great lengths to boost its navy, for example, to make sure its weapons manufacturing is higher and faster than it's ever been before. We talk about the Chinese threat to Taiwan. I think about the connections between the anti-Western axis and what China might be supplying to active war zones in in Iran, in Ukraine, to our foreign enemies, and the sort of threat that they pose in that regard as well, because Andy Burnham has turned around and basically suggested that he's still going to stick with the plan of giving the Chagos Islands to Mauritius as well. He doesn't seem to understand this, so perhaps if he's watching, which he won't be, perhaps you might be able to explain to him why China is more than just a threat when it comes to undercutting us economically.
Yeah, so we see Chinese cleverness here again. They have a strict non-interventionist policy, so they don't deploy Chinese troops outside their borders to go and support their allies in other conflicts. But what they do is provide huge amounts of arms, huge amounts of intelligence. So we're looking at Iran, the war there right now. We know there have been Chinese resupply of weapons to the Iranians, even as the Americans degrade their existing stocks. So China is, directly sending in resupply there. They have a muscular approach to their own backyard. So in the South China Sea, they're taking atolls and uninhabited islands in the South Pacific and turning them into militarized bases. Certainly, the Australians frequently get buzzed by Chinese PLA forces. So this is a very aggressive country when it comes to flexing in their own backyard, but it's also absolutely happy to keep instability going on our borders as well. Be that in Iran, be that in Ukraine, where China has been supporting Russia for the last 4 years. Now, notwithstanding that China and Russia do have their own frictions over territory in the east of Russia, but they are still very much keen to make sure that destabilization happens. So they are happy to fund and arm our enemies to keep us on our toes and keep us weaker. And that's all part of their much wider, very sophisticated strategic plan that they have.
It's always great catching up, Andrew. You know so much and you're so eloquent. You always put things in such a beautiful way. Mr. Andrew Fox, Senior Associate Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. We're going to be taking a short break. Now, after the break, here's a topic that really ground my gears. You're like, what one is it now, Alex? What's upset you, especially this week, on top of all the usual things? No, it's actually the closure of Jodrell Bank. I mean, this has really peeved me, right? This is this big, huge, amazing satellite that's been in operation for 70 years, scanning the furthest bounds of the sky in our space exploration, our better understanding of the universe. 2 million quid is all it costs to run that thing. 2 million quid. I mean, that's a lot to me. I don't have 2 million quid. If I did, I'd give it to Jodrell Bank. But in the grand scheme of things for a government, that's nothing. That is literally about 12 hours of accommodation for the migrants or the illegals that have come in. That's it. Half a day, basically, of what we're spending on putting these randos up in hotels. And it's being closed. And that huge satellite, I mean, there's something romantic about it because it's sort of physical symbolism, is emblematic of greatness, of research capacity, of the huge the rich seam of academia we have in this nation. We have been, England, Scotland especially, have been at the forefront of science for centuries. Who came up with the steam engine? Who invented the computer? Who invented the internet? Who invented the vaccine? The list goes on and on and on. This is why 25% of the world's top 100 universities are in this country, because we are excellent. We have got such capable human resource. We're an extremely clever, savvy, adept, learned nation. Well, we were once upon a time. And I just remember that huge satellite, it was sort of on stamps and beginning of the news, there it is, the silhouette of it. Because it represented something very important to any developed, civilised society, and that is education. And it's being closed down. Can't afford it. What's the point paying for it? I don't know. Let's just, throw some money at lanyards instead. I know someone who's just as exercised about this as I am. She happens to be the Shadow Side's Innovation and Technology Secretary. Julia Lopez MP joins us after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. And without further ado, because I think I teed it up nicely just before the advert break, let us talk about the closure of Jodrell Bank with Julia Lopez MP, who also happens to be the Shadow Science, Innovation and Technology Secretary. It's great to have you on the programme, Julia. Before we kick off, by the way, someone once told me that we're lookalikes of one another. Imagine
I heard this.
I know, I've heard it a few times, and weirdly, I actually see it myself. So there we are, sisters, reunited.
We are two separate people. It can be confirmed.
Yeah, here you go, living proof. But anyway, not only do we apparently share similar facial architecture, we also share a hatred of the fact that blimmin' Jodrell Bank is being closed down, and we also share a hatred of lanyardism. So tell me, what is going on? Why is it being closed? Why?
So this is the latest in a series of problems that have been caused by cuts that the STFC, which is a scientific funding body, are having to make. And they had a flat budget from the government, but at the same time, they've had rising energy costs due to Ed Miliband's crazy policies. They've had to deal with bigger wage bills, and they're having to keep up with international subs, which are increasing by something like 19%. So the upshot of all of that stuff is that they're having to make cuts to some of our key scientific capabilities. That includes Jodrell Bank, which is the news we heard this week, but it's also seeing cuts to key physics funding. It's also seeing challenges to running our national facilities, like the Diamond Light Source, which is a synchrotron in Oxfordshire, also lasers and other things like that. They're very energy intensive, and they're going to have to make savings when it comes to operating these amazing facilities. And this is not just, wonky science for the sake of it. This actually feeds a lot of businesses around places like the Harwell campus. So it's a massive own goal for the government in doing this, because it's actually affecting a lot of the high growth industries in defence, in space and in health. So I really think they need to be looking again at what's going on here.
Is this about sort of reprioritising spending? Is it about sort of economic factors? You talk about how, how much energy consumption is required to run some of these synchrotrons. I don't even know what that is, but I want to. Can I come and see it before it's, completely
go
mothballed?
to Harwell. It's absolutely incredible.
What is a synchrotron?
It shoots electrons very, very fast at different materials, and then you can understand what's in the material. So things like viruses, you want to understand what's going on inside a virus, or how a jet engine may have been stressed from use. And that's why it has applications from healthcare to defence and to also various engineering things. You want to understand how a material is being affected by things. So you shoot these electrons at it, and it tells you lots of very interesting information. So this is why this is not just about science for science sake, although that is incredibly important. This actually has wider industrial application, which is why we really have to be thinking very carefully about what's going on here. And I don't think that these cuts are justified at a time when crazy stuff is being funded. Now, Alex, I raised in the House of Commons some of the things that are being funded. There's a great journalist called Charlotte Gill who looks at some of this crazy stuff. And I'll give you a few examples. We're spending £1.3 million on a study into climate coloniality. We are spending £1.1 million on a study into decolonising justice, and we are spending £1.5 million on a study about transforming LGBTIQ+ asylum policy. Now, it costs £2.8 million, something like that, to run Jodrell Bank, and I just don't think it's justified to be shuttering something as iconic as that while we're still funding this crazy stuff. And I think the government needs to be doing a facility by facility review of what's going to be the impact of these STFC cuts, and it also needs to be looking at some of the underlying cost drivers like energy, like the cost of employing people and so on.
I was just thinking, do you reckon we should take Andy Burnham, put him in the synchrotron, shoot some electrons at him to try and find out what his policies might be?
Not sure what we would find inside.
I know, that's the problem. Probably a black hole, the likes of which Jodrell Bank might have been able to identify. But are there moves afoot to protest this? Is there sort of private sector investment that might be able to save it? Is there a way in which Jodrell can continue to poke about in the furthest reaches of the universe?
Well, look, Jodrell is funded in part by the University of Manchester, so that should be something that impresses the the MP for Makerfield.
The magical N-word, the mayor of Manchester, who now runs the country.
Well, indeed, and Manchester
Manchesterism.
University has a presence at the Harwell campus, so if that appeals to him, he might think about it. But really, the ball is now in Andy Burnham's court. Now, if he wants to stop bad things that have been happening before he took the seat of Prime Minister, then he can do that now. And this is something that has been a campaign that's been running for about 6 months. It's got the likes of Professor Brian Cox involved. He's also a Mancunian insofar as Mr. Burnham cares about that. And it really is time for this decision to be reviewed because, as I say, it's an act of national self-harm at a time when we really need to be boosting industries like defence, like space, like healthcare. This is where all the growth really should be coming in our economy. And I wrote in the Telegraph today, Alex, about some of the decisions the government makes about who they are employing and how much they're paying. If you contrast somebody that's a technician or an engineer at Harwell on 34 grand, Andy Burnham's currently advertising for social media people for number 10 North. They're paying something like 55 to 65 grand for those positions. Now, I think that tells you something about this government's priorities. It's absolutely nuts. And we've got to do something to get their priorities in the right place, because this really is not just about science. It's about defence. It's about our economy. It's about our healthcare. It's about all those cutting edge industries that we really need to be relying upon if we're actually going to get any growth in this economy.
No, I fully agree. I just think it's tragic. The idea that Andy Burnham is more focused on making TikTok videos with a load of, you know, tweenies and giving them 55 grand in whatever it is, number 10 of the North. I'd love to know how much number 10 of the North and his private jet up there costs, because if that is the same as Jodrell Bank, I think I know which one I'd rather be funding, rather than the vanity project, so the mayor of Manchester can continue to live at home and, I don't know, pretend he's representing the North as much as anywhere else and evade any sort of accountability from lobbyists, lobby journalists, Whitehall and fellow politicians. If that's costing over 2 million quid, then I think I know exactly where I want to get the money from for Jodrell Bank. What are your next plans on this, Julia?
Well, look, we've called for a facility-by-facility review by the STFC about what the wider impact of those cuts will be on the economy, on our defence, and all manner of other things. And we are pretty confident that that review would show up that this is a much wider issue than some kind of academic debate between different scientists in different parts of the UKRI funding space. So we really need to see that review. And when it highlights what we think it will, then Andy Burnham really needs to look at this decision again and do something to change it. And as I say, it also needs to look at the underlying cost drivers. That is the crazy energy policies that Labour have been pursuing, the crazy wage and employment policy they've been pursuing, and also the fact that we're having to pay higher subs to European institutions while cutting our own national capability. All of this adds up to a very silly picture, and we have to do something to protect our national infrastructure.
Well, Julia, you know, my granddad, the late Roy Phillips, was a geologist, and he was of the first geologists to study the rock brought back from the first lunar expedition, very infamous in his field. So this stuff means a lot to me. And also, as we happen to be separated at birth, perhaps we should sit down, make a plan and do our family trees together one day.
Yeah, I know where mine goes back. I don't know what your various surnames are, but I'm pretty sure we haven't crossed paths genetically, but you never know. You never know. It's just the lottery of life that apparently we look similar to each other. Nice to finally interview you with that split screen. I'm going to have to watch it back and sort of look at the, you know, comparative features. Julia, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the programme, and do keep us updated about the campaign to save Jodrell Bank, because I for one, certainly want to see that thing preserved. Should we do some calls to take us to the top of the hour? Let's speak to Leanne, who's in London. Good morning, Leanne.
Hi, good morning, Alex. Please bear with me because I'm just getting over a sore throat. So my voice
poor thing, in the middle of a heat wave as well. That's supposed to be a winter affliction.
Yeah. Listen, I wanted to say to you, no one has picked up on this or thought about this avenue, but quite frankly, it's very clear. France looks at UK as their Rwanda. And the beauty is they get £600 million for it as well. And they just have to dabble here, dabble there to show a little bit of, we've done this, we've done that. And if you have to look at it from that side, they get them coming there and just help them on board more so Isabel Oakeshott's video this morning. Amazing, amazing. Now, how we on the ground level we know what's going on. We can see we're being abused. Our rights are being given away. Every government that comes in, there's a global Marxist agenda. Every country has it. It's just done in a different level. With us, it's a higher level because we can tolerate more and more. Just send them. Let's send them. And plus, we have wonderful governments that give carte blanche to these people, telling the people of this land, the generations of fathers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers that fought in this country, their children, their generations, and they're being abused in this country. No female, whatever age you can be, 0 to 100, being a female, that female is in danger.
Yeah. I agree. Can I just say, Leanne, your framing is absolutely chef's kiss exquisite. You're right. We have, haven't we? Inadvertently become France's Rwanda plan. What did we want to do? We wanted to use third countries to process whether or not people can declare asylum, right? And the plan was to get them all in some sort of vessel, send them all over to Rwanda where they would be housed in makeshift accommodation, little houses, HMOs, where then they would be processed. You're right. They're living in the sand dunes of France, being shipped over here to be processed. Do you know, I hadn't even thought of it like that. That is so farcical. Brilliant. Well identified, Leanne. I'm going to nick that from you, if you don't mind me. I'm going to make that reference myself to various people. I'll continue doing it on this programme. I'll call it Leanne's Law, shall I? But no, I just want to say that was absolutely brilliantly put, well-defined, and the sheer risibility and hypocrisy of it has not escaped my attention. Leanne, thank you for probably one of the best calls I've had in a long, long time. And all your calls are brilliant, but that just hit the nail on the proverbial head, didn't it? Let us finish up with some messages. Alex, why are we still sending money to France when they're obviously allowing it? They should cut off funds until they do what we're paying them for, and also stop foreign aid to countries that refuse to take migrants back. We have so many levers we can pull. We've even got the T lever that Donald Trump likes. That's right, tariff, ding, ding, because we left the customs union. We do our own trade deals now. We give visa rights to various countries. We could turn around to wherever and say, right, none of your officials get visas, none of your sports teams, none of anything, none of you can come. And definitely the big foreign aid check that's going in the back pocket of your dictator is not going to be written anymore. Sorry, Alex, it's the Fabian Society pushing Burnham and they can see their goal, says Nicholas in Essex. Too right. And someone's messaged in, that's it, I'm going to stop drinking. I just turned the television on and I can see you twice. So there you go. You think I look like Julia Lopez? I've heard it before. Right, OK, we're taking a short break. Big Trevor Kavanagh, joins us after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. I'm laughing because if I didn't laugh, I'd cry. I would cry. I would actually just get into fetal position under the desk, clutch myself with my own loving arms and sob myself into oblivion because things don't get better, do they? No, every single day you get the papers, wake up in the morning, usually listen. The best part of my day, right, my alarm goes off at 5:30, which means normally I get to sneak in the shipping forecast, which is great. It's poetry, it is pure, unadulterated, quintessential Britain, and it makes me feel really happy that I live in these wonderful isles with, you know, places called Norfolk, Zera and Dogger just dotted around them. Then it's Farming Today, which tends to be a little bit woke. They love a bit of net zero on that programme, so that one, you know, sort of things start declining after that moment, and then I buckle myself up for the Today programme. And then while I'm listening to that and sitting on the train, I go through all the newspapers, and do you know what? I look at these headlines. I look at the photographs especially, the videos online of all these miscreants, these tenacious young men who have fled their countries to come over here and, well, I don't know, be scattered around. I mean, look at them. All the nuclear physicists, the engineers, the doctors. I cannot wait. I mean, by gum, we should just turn up on the beaches. I should have them in my house. Look, they're lovely. I've got a spare room. I wonder how many I could fit in there. No doubt they'd be great at cooking and cleaning. Oh, they'd be amazing company. They wouldn't pose any harm to me at all. I trust each and every one of them. They look like such upstanding, well-educated young gentlemen who share my Christian values. And on it goes. And Andy Burnham, what's he saying about it? Yeah, that's right. He isn't. Oh, apart from he said the plan's working. Which plan? Stop the boats? No, that was the last government's plan, and that hasn't happened. Smash the gangs? Oh, yeah. No, they haven't been smashed, have they? They certainly haven't been smashed when they're now buying dinghies longer than a double-decker bus and making 300 grand a crossing. That don't really look like smashing the gangs to me. It looks like they're having a smashing good time, making a lot of money. Let's speak now to probably the equally peeved and demoralised Trevor Kavanagh, former political editor of The Sun. Trev, I don't know what to say on this. I just don't even... I've run out of words. Leanne, the caller just before the break, said something that I thought was quite astute, which is she said, you do realise France is using us as Rwanda. And I thought, you're right, aren't you? Because we're now seeing the French police sort of give out the jackets and push the boats over to the UK, which has been going on for ages. And then, of course, well, I say process them, we don't. We just stick them in all the HMOs, scatter them around the country, and France doesn't have to deal with them. But surely if we've given them money, there's got to be some sort of contract involved.
Well, there is, and they've broken it. I mean, look, the sort of crew numbers they've got, or the passenger numbers on these huge dinghies that are coming across now used to be the equivalent of a Boeing jet full. And we're getting them on every single day. We're not doing anything to send them back in real terms. And we're simply having to put up with the fact that we've got people who are alien, as you've explained several times over the last few weeks, months, and even perhaps years, alien to everything we stand for in this country, to our culture, to our religion, to our freedoms. And these are coming across in the tens of thousands. And we simply cannot accommodate them over a period of time. And this is going to backfire. It is already backfiring. Somewhere down the road, it's going to backfire extremely seriously, dangerously, and worryingly.
What I don't understand, Trev, is that the excuse has been so far about the Gordian knot of international law and human rights legislation and not being able to have deals where we send boats back to France because Brexit or whatever other, you know, rubbish, vacuous, venal and vapid excuse they come up with, which is all just BS. But we were run by human rights lawyers just a, you know, whisker ago, probably could have done something about that. But we now have concrete intelligence, which we've doubtless had for years anyway, that operatives for the IRGC, terrorists, have been and are being shipped into the country via those illegal routes. Well, of course, we know this. We've known it for a long time, which means, as far as I can tell, we could declare a crisis and actually put in place emergency legislation. And something tells me that if we did that, if all of a sudden Andy Burnham discovered that he had a spine and turned around and said, enough is enough, I know now. There was an attack, wasn't there? An attempted attack of, I think it was a Somalian or a Sudanese migrant, one of these people in a hotel or an HMO, taking a petrol can and a knife to the school gates of somewhere in Manchester. Andy's beloved Manchester. Oh, my gosh, what was he planning to do with those, I wonder? You would think at this point, you could have a Prime Minister to turn around and say, this is a national security threat. On those grounds, France, I'm sorry, the boats are going to be turned around. End of. International law exists here no more because we are in trouble deep. And I don't understand the psychology of our leaders that they will not do that.
Well, I think that you've got a clue about their attitude to this sort of thing, which is part of the defense of the realm, really, isn't it? Because these migrants will include people who are Iranian supporters or members of the IRGC, and they will not be coming just unarmed. What is in their rucksacks? How many explosives, guns, bullets, ammunition, and so on are they smuggling into the country along with their other materials? I think that's the problem. What you heard from Wes Streeting in that clip you played on the news a moment ago is the clearest indication of how seriously this government is taking it. When he was asked about whether he would increase the defence spending to the appropriate level, he said the government was not going to engage in reckless spending. That is a big clue as to the way they treat the defence of this country. And what they are actually recklessly spending on is welfare, which allows anybody with any sort of invented health problem to claim billions from the taxpayer, which should be going to defending our borders, defending our nation.
I interviewed Darren Grimes earlier on in the show, who's Deputy Leader of Durham County Council. And I asked him about Operation Scatter, because the thing that is terrifying me now, Trev. As you well know, I've moved out into the wilds of the West Country because I thought London wasn't particularly safe and it didn't really look like Britain anymore. Frankly, I was homesick. I was homesick for the concept of England, not just homesick for my county. But in the newspapers lately, we know that there's got to be a mass house building exercise. And look, as a young person who's only just been able to get, well, I'm not that young, actually, I'm 42, but only just been able to get on the housing ladder, I'm very sympathetic that we need new houses built. And indeed, there will be 3,000 new houses projected to be built the other side of town where I live. And I'm like, well, that's fine. They're not in the fields over the road from me. And great, we do need new housing stock. What terrifies me, right, is I'm certain what's going to happen here is they will ring-fence some of that housing stock for our mates from Sudan, Eritrea, Somalia, Afghanistan, Syria, Iran, Iraq, you name it. I have no doubt that some of these new houses will be given, if not even those people be prioritised to have them. And what scares me is then when I, in a couple of years' time, walk into my quintessentially safe English, beautiful, neighbourly-minded, wonderful little town, there's all of a sudden going to be some pretty frightening men lurking around, which will completely change the complexion of how life has been thus far. And I asked Darren Grimes about this, and I said, what is the situation in County Durham with HMOs? And he told me, and I couldn't believe this, he said that actually the government, the Home Office, refuse to give him that information. They will not share it. They will not share where the HMOs are, how many there are, who's in them, the plans for future HMOs, because they've got to protect the security and the dignity of these new men who are coming over. And I just think, what on earth? He's the deputy leader of that county council. He cannot even put in place recommendations, warnings, infrastructure, measures to protect people.
Of course, they're excuse me, they're protecting them from the extreme far-right fascist movement, which is so powerful and strong in this country, aren't they? They are actually inventing this threat so that they can keep quiet about the true facts, which are appalling the residents of this country. And they will not give you, for instance, the actual crime statistics for those who go to prison, where they come from, what proportion of violent crimes are committed by members of the migrant community, especially if they happen to come from a particular community. And this is building real serious problems. In fact, the problems are already built. It's frankly, I think, too late to do anything about it. You say you're now in the West Country. I've been living in the City of London for 15 years, and I've seen in that comparatively short period of time a total transformation of the population profile of people you see walking the streets. And nowadays you see dozens of women in the full niqab and the whole sort of gown and plumage of practicing Muslim wife under the orders of their husband to cover their modesty. And it is actually an affront, I think, to those of us who have been born and bred here, who have had and enjoyed a culture which has been here for decades and generations, to suddenly have to find ourselves in deference to these newcomers who have barged their way in.
I'll tell you what, Trev, and I'm not saying this because I advocate for this. I'm not saying it because I'd condone it if it happened. I'm saying this because of the conversations that I have with people where I live who are very, very angry about this, and they don't even have the problem on their doorstep. It doesn't exist yet, really, where I live. And that is people in sort of metropolitan cities, multiculti cities, they can see the pace of change. I had to get out of London. I was done with it. But they can see the pace of change, but they're perhaps a little bit more sort of naturalised towards it. They're used to it. If the people where I live go to town and some sort of, you know, random geezer from a boat lays one finger on one of the women in my area, we're talking farmers with shotguns, and I'm not saying that to encourage or suggest anything, but I know the sort of things they're saying. When it starts hitting some of these other areas, there will be vigilantism. Of that, I'm certain.
I think that is inevitable, but I think that will be crushed immediately by the police and the authorities, who will brook no opposition to the sort of things that are upsetting your listeners and viewers. And they will take the absolute opposite action to the one that we would regard as being the right course for them to take. They will protect at any cost the community that we've introduced into this country, in ghettos across the cities of this country, and in very large numbers. Now, you've moved down to the West Country, and in your place, people are moving into the parts of London that you've left, or the home counties that you've left, and the cities across the country that are being filled by people who are not from our way of life. And this is basically a chemical formula which is explosive, and it is already simmering, but it's being crushed and cracked down on by authorities who simply will not recognize it or tolerate it in the way that they do when people are expressing themselves about, for instance, Gaza or modesty or any other thing that appeals to the Muslim community. And I hesitate to keep using the word Muslim community, but I can't think of another one.
But it is. We need to use the word.
I risk being banned from your program.
Not under my watch, you don't. We'll go set up our own thing if that ever happened. Because, you know, actually, let's digress onto that, because it was a point I was making the other day. In the wake of the horrific attack in Berlin, all the leftists, all the right-on said, oh, we need to stand in solidarity with the LGBTQI+ community. This is why we need pride marches. It's like, no, it's not. You don't need pride marches. What you need to do is deal with the amount of people coming from countries who, frankly, want to chuck you off the roof of a building. They're not using the word. They didn't say this is Muslim terrorism. Then the next day, there was some man who stabbed 3 women in France. One of them was pregnant, and he said, Allah made me do it. 2 lines below in the newspaper copy from Agence France Presse, he said, the French police are looking for the motive for this attack. Yeah. Really? Why? We're not even, like, at least at the turn of the century, we could say Muslim terrorism. At least we had a big stress about when all the people were running over to go and be ISIS fighters and the, you know, wannabe caliphate of Syria, and we spoke about it. Now, there could actually be a man with a giant beard and exploding backpack come into the studio, put a gun against my head, wave an ISIS flag, and we'd have to go, oh, I wonder what's made him do that.
Well, look, I'm smiling and laughing at your description of all this, but it's actually deeply sinister.
Yeah.
DEI, diversity and all the rest of that rubbish, is in fact DIE. It is the death of Western society. We are simply like frogs in boiling water. We are going to get boiled alive by this incredible threat to our way of life, to democracy. Democracy is freedom of speech. We cannot say in public the sort of things that, frankly, we're very fortunate to be able to say on talk radio and on other networks. But we are muffled and muzzled by the authorities, the Home Office, the BBC, the government in every possible way, the police particularly, who will not tolerate, I mean, this is outrageous, but they will not tolerate what amounts to free speech. And as long as free speech can't flourish openly in a democratic society, democracy itself withers. And we are fighting a losing battle right now. Every time we, the Henry Novak murder, we think, well, that's a threshold that now cannot be crossed again. This is the end of DEI. It isn't. They just simply come back and grow more heads and, cut one off and another 10 grow. This is the way it is. And we are heading for serious, serious problems. And anybody who happens to say so is immediately denounced as an Islamophobic, racist, fascist, right-wing extremist.
I mean, lanyardism in general, DEI, net zero. I mean, thank goodness Kemi Badenoch's turning around and saying we can't stick with these targets. It was, of course, her government, and she was in cabinet at the time, who wanted to push all this stuff and sign those treaties and prove to the world we were so virtuous by going further and faster and self-harming than anybody else. Donald Trump apparently says that Andy Burnham says, yes, I'm going to drill in the North Sea. I don't believe a word of it.
Well, I think that as long as Ed Miliband has anything to say, we'll be doing precious little in the way of drilling or taking gas out of North Sea reservoirs. I mean, it's just, it's crazy. I mean, the whole point about this government, allegedly, the Andy Burnham regime, is cost of living. Cost of living basically is affected from beginning to end by energy prices. If we have the highest energy prices in Europe, we have automatically very high cost of living. You can't escape from it. And our percentage of output of carbon emissions is negligible in the whole world. And yet we are paying exorbitant prices for tightening our belts and going without. And this cannot endure. And yet it is. I mean, I keep saying this cannot endure, but we're putting up with the problem of mass immigration, the boats and the traffic across the channel. We're putting up with net zero and all the privations that it's causing. And we have a government in office, which in fact has had a bounce because of some of the measures that it's putting in place, and could actually call an early election and get another 5 years. We are absolutely screwed if they do that.
No, I know. And, so many callers say the same thing. What can I do? What can we do? And I always say, well, the only thing we can do, quite frankly, within the confines of law, is vote. Is the ballot box. And yet it seems to me increasingly democracy is an inconvenience. They'll do anything they can to either boycott elections, cancel elections, discredit elections. We don't even have the ballot box, Trevor. So what can we do?
Well, I'm afraid that unless you have protests in the streets, the only thing that MPs and parliamentarians, politicians generally do is respond to what people actually do and say. Their mailboxes, what the people are saying in their letters to their members of parliament, or if they were to do a proper protest. But we are not. We're atomized in the sense that we are not an homogenous society. Excuse me. Like those organized in the Gaza protests, God knows where they come from with their distorted view of history and reality. But they do. They come and they actually organize, and they're very noisy, violent, and they get online and they actually get their way by the most blatant bullying. That's the only tactic that the government will listen to. And that's not there. We are a supine nation. We are not a nation like we're supposed to be of angry voters who will not put up with this. We do put up with it.
I tell you what, I think there's only so much that English can put up with, and at some point the centre won't hold anymore. I know it, you know it. The question is when. Oh, Trevor, thank you so much. I love speaking to you because we do manage to laugh through all the crises somehow, because seriously, if you don't, you'd end up, I don't know, jumping off the 17th floor. Lovely view out there. Trevor Kavanagh, ladies and gentlemen. Right. We're going to take a short break. After the break, I want to chat with some of you. It's time for your calls and your messages. So if you want to get in touch, the number is 03444 991 That is the number to give me a call. It's your normal network rate. You can use that number as well to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 8722 is the number to send a text. If you're going to do that, you've got to write the word talk before you type out your text. We are back just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. I've been having so much fun today having this joint therapy session with you. So let's all recline on the chaise longue of common sense and let it all out, get it off our chest. Let's begin with Tony in Lancashire. Hi, Tony.
Hi, Alex. You okay?
Oh, yeah. I don't know, really. That's a big question, I suppose. In the grand scheme of things, I'm surviving. What about you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. But I'm sort of on the fence a lot with the French thing because, to me, we're the problem. If I was France, I wouldn't want these people in, and they've got their own problems. They've got a mess. They're an absolute mess at the moment. But, I mean, if they are coming to France because they want to come to England, if my next-door neighbour was giving money away in his back garden and people were climbing over my fence to get to them, I would want them out in my garden. So I don't get why France would want to hold on to these dregs and unknowns and all the rest of it. They're coming because we're dangling the carrot. Somebody made a decision in our country to say, you can have free accommodation and we will pay you and we will give you a Sports Direct tracksuit and you can have driving lessons and, you know, flamenco lessons and whatever else you want. With this massive draw, so people are coming through Europe to come to us, so why would they hang on to...
Well, this is it. I mean, the Mayor of Calais once said that the problem is we are the El Dorado for migrants. But also, you know, on the flip side to that, Tony, here's the interesting thing. Because if France were to say, do you know what? Send a boat round in the other direction and we will drag it back in and we'll just build a sort of makeshift centre over here and just chuck them in there. It would actually be a deterrent. All of a sudden, the people traffickers would go, oh, perhaps we can't do that anymore. And then as a result, all the people accumulating in the sand dunes of Calais might not accumulate there anymore. We definitely need to work with France on this. I know conversations are happening between populist parties in Europe. I know that because as an MEP in the European Parliament, so I know a lot of the like-minded individuals in political parties across Europe. And I've been matchmaking some of them of late, and I think that in September there will be some interesting things to come out to that end. But I don't know. At the end of the day, we cannot rely upon neighbouring countries to solve this problem for us. We've got to have a government who puts our needs first and who actually shows some spine and some backbone when it comes to having to deal with this. And what is sickening me is we've been given Andy Burnham, right, which is basically like a spoonful of sugar for the medicine to go down. That's all he is. That is what he is. He's lipstick on a pig. He looks nice. He speaks human. He doesn't look like if you were to, like, you know, take off the suit jacket, wires would be hanging out the back of it, like that automaton Starmer. He is there, essentially, to beguile us into thinking that he's on our side, that he's just like us, that Andy, our Andy, that's a new thing now. It's not our NHS anymore, it's our Andy. He's not my Andy, he's nobody's Andy. Well, he's Andy for the sake of Andy. He's Andy, the favourite new toy of the Fabians.
Yeah, he was our MP, I know him. He was the MP for Lee, where I'm from, and my daughter used to play netball with his daughter on the same team, so I've sat and chat with him a few times in the past. Yeah, you know, but...
I'm not saying he's not a nice man. He seems like a nice man.
He is, but the problem is, for me, somebody made the decision to give all this free stuff away. We don't have to do it by law. The rest of Europe don't give all this stuff away like we do. Somebody made that decision somewhere down the line. That decision needs to be reversed ASAP. Why has nobody done that? Do you know when that? Do you know whoever made that decision? Who said we're going to give all this free stuff to anybody that comes here? Who did it? When did it happen? And why can't we reverse it? Why can't we say no? This stops.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it, Tony? In order to unpick all of that supranational legislation, you know, international human rights, do you know what would be really useful to have? In order to undo all that stuff, it'd be really useful if a Prime Minister and the Attorney General could have been human rights lawyers.
They're the worst thing on the planet.
There you are. There you are. You've got to laugh, because otherwise you'll cry. Tony, thank you ever so much for your call. And I don't want to spend too long on the phone to anyone, because we all need therapy, including Chris in Epsom. He's a regular caller. I think his therapeutic needs are pretty off the charts at this point. How you doing, Chris?
Boiling over. Alex, I'll answer Tony's question as to why we give all that stuff away. Because a certain barrister that took the government to court to give them all of that, and he won, and his name was Starmer. Did you not know that?
You might have seen how I just ended that last call with my little ironic reflection on who has just been in power.
Yeah, it was down to him. We give everything away. Now, Alex, you know what I'm like. Now, last month I went into business with a Polish man, a lovely guy, and I've just come back from a week in Poland.
Yeah.
What a fantastic country.
Well, they got borders.
Oh, listen, they changed their law, by the way, a few months back. The armed forces are now allowed to shoot them if they come through the
and that's great. They've literally got these chicken wire fences, and as much as Belarus like to try and bust people to those fences to break in, they have soldiers with girt machine guns, and if anyone gets close, a little vehicle turns up and snatches them up, and they'll actually fire rubber bullets through the fence if they start kicking off. And I believe Poland, I'll have to look this up, but I believe Poland turned around and went, I think Hungary definitely did, but I think Poland might have done as well. We can't take asylum seekers, sorry. And right. I don't see them standing in The Hague in the International Criminal Court for being so unpleasant to the poor, you know, illegal migrants. Everyone's just gone, you can't take asylum seekers, never mind. Actually, Hungary turned around and said, we're not going to take any asylum seekers. And the EU said, right, well, we're going to find you 100 million euros a day or something like that. And Hungary's like, OK. That's probably cheaper than putting all these people up and completely culturally vandalising our great nation.
Alex, the fine that Poland's paying the EU is £1 million a day. That's 365 million in a year. We've given the French 500 million, and they ain't stopping them.
I know.
It's ridiculous. Do you know what the trade imbalance was in 2025 between France and England?
Tell me.
£8.3 billion. All we need to do, all right, is tell France, you stop the boats. Every time a boat leaves your coastline, we take one fishing licence away.
Yeah, I was going to say, no, the way to bring the French to the table is just to say the word scallops, isn't it?
Yeah, listen, we've got an 8.3 billion trade surplus. What type of lever is that we can pull against them to actually do something? Because Tony's right. We are the pull. We are the problem. And we need to deal with that. And that was Starmer that put that in place.
Oh, it's all of them. It's all of them. It didn't start with Starmer, and it ain't going to end with Burnham. I can tell you that much for free. Chris, thank you ever so much for your call. It's always wonderful to hear from you. We're going to be taking a short break now. Something else that's popped up in the news today is the Met Police have decided they're not going to take any action over the photograph that Zach Polanski shared of a T-shirt showing Nigel Farage's execution, because they basically said, well, it's just a little bit of a satire, isn't it? That's not actually incitement. Funny that one can use common sense when it's a legislation being applied to the left wing, but if that was the other way round, you can bet your bottom dollar that would have not been the decision that they came to. We're going to be discussing this and what on earth is going on in the brain, in the psychology of that party, because while I did not remotely agree with the idea of reporting this to the police, because I just think that's a zero-sum game, right? I think that's a race to the bottom when it comes to free speech and all the rest of it, and a waste of police time. What I do agree with, though, is the existential threat to particularly people in the public eye on the right wing, and the fact that there are some absolute Fruit Loops on the radical left with a sort of death cult agenda, quite frankly. They really, these people do think we're evil. I'm certain of it. And actually, when you look at psychological research into things such as critical race theory, unconscious bias training, actually it is brainwashing people into authoritarianism. And there are also the dark triad tropes among the far left of Machiavellianism, narcissism and sociopathy. It's why so many have to have mental hairstyles. It's the look at me culture. I'm holier than thou. Everyone else is evil and I'll do whatever it takes to get on top. You know, they look at us like we've got all the joy, that we're evil, we got things that they don't have and we have to be stopped. And I want to discuss all of this because once upon a time the Green Party was all about, you know, pandas and rainforests. Now it seems to me to be about tyrannical far leftism and Islamism. Who better to talk to about what is going on than the former deputy leader of the Green Party, who's been very outspoken on this topic, Shahrar Ali. I'm pleased to say he joins us just after this break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
The Green Party have been around an awfully long time. I don't know how long, but a long time. They've been a sort of part of the political infrastructure of this country for decades, and they were always quite nice. They sort of had knitted jumpers, and they wanted to, you know, campaign for animal welfare, good husbandry practices, saving the planet, making sure there's fewer landfill sites, you know, green things, ecology, essentially. Also, factoid, you might not know this, but once upon a time, the Green Party supported leaving the EU, you know, a corporate cartel of 30,000 lobbyists working on behalf of multinational companies, etc. But they don't really look and sound like that anymore. Now they seem to my eyes at least, be infiltrated by what I can only describe as militant radical leftists who scare me half to death, because the problem is they sort of pathologise life's issues into an us versus them. They see us as an enemy. They see us as evil. They're there with their posters and their mad haircuts, saying things like stamp on the necks of the Nazis, stop the fascists. And that's pretty, well, strong language, because historically you can't really get more evil than the Nazis. And yet a lot of their behaviour seems to me to be extremely fascistic. And the thing is, when you get to the stage where, you know, the leader of Reform UK, love him or loathe him, gets over 700 death threats a month, where my former colleague from the European Parliament, Anne Widdecombe, got bludgeoned to death in her own home. Oh, of course, we can't talk about that. No, we can't talk about it for legal reasons, by the way, because someone's been charged. But also interesting that that has been brushed under the carpet. All of a sudden, it's a burglary gone wrong, and then, oh, no, counter-terror police. This isn't funny anymore. And so while I fundamentally disagree with the idea that a T-shirt should require phoning the police, because I do, I totally agree with two things that Nigel Farage has said. One is that if the boot was on the other foot, the consequences for him would have been extreme. Extreme. If a reform activist had, you know, alluded to executing the leader of another political party and Nigel Farage had reposted it, my goodness, it would be, are you going to resign? Or actually, all the mad, short-fringed, you know, nose-ringed ones would be outside the Reform HQ offices, probably chucking things at the windows and screeching and dragging people's hair out, because that's what they do. So first of all, there is the two-tierism, which is too mild a term to use, in my opinion. But there then is also this horrible brewing underlying threat, the be kind or be nice, and this peculiar marriage between extreme Marxism and Islamism, and that is a terrifying cocktail. How did this happen? Well, let's speak to Shahrar Ali now, who's former deputy leader of the Green Party and has bravely spoken out about such changes. I am so appreciative of you joining me. Let's start with the Zach Polanski thing, right? I mean, look, he says it was a social media mistake. He refuses to apologise for it, but then he's all Mr. Everyone should be nice to each other, hashtag be kind, I'm more virtuous than thou. He's not really, is he? He knows what's going on in his party. He knows exactly what's going on in his party, surely.
Well, let me just start by saying you've painted quite a bleak picture of the Green Party's current influence in democratic politics in this country, and I'm afraid I would agree with you. I did warn against the consequences of electing Zach Polanski last year, and actually that was a one-year term and he should be up for re-election this year, but that's another matter, how he's managed to escape that. But yeah, there has been a growing trend within the party, which I've seen at very close quarters over the last 10 years in particular, where people who want to debate anything and everything, which is very healthy and I would say necessary in a democratic society, they get pushed out and persecuted and have to face weaponized disciplinary complaints when they're not in alignment with an authoritarian clique in the party. And this is particularly evident with respect to gender critical. It's as if the Green Party adopts a binary position on everything except biological sex. And that's, of course, a nonsense because a lot of our policies are full of common sense biological premises. But Polanski has had a detrimental impact, not on the growth of the party or the membership of the party. Of course, that's been quite phenomenal, maybe over 100,000 members over the last 12 months under his stewardship. But what he has done, he's ratcheted up, I think, the negative, divisive political rhetoric. And what his behavior in the last couple of days, he's compounded his initial mistake, and I'm prepared to accept that he didn't fully see what he had done, but he's made his situation considerably worse in his refusal repeatedly to apologise for what, even if it was an innocent mistake, we often do apologise for innocent mistakes. And his reasons for not wanting to apologise are frankly preposterous.
Yeah, I mean, it's petulant and it's pathetic and lacking any sort of moral compass or backbone. But one thing I want to ask you about in particular, though, is something very specific has happened to the Green Party over the last few years. It's happened, actually, with other far-left I'm going to call it far-left organisations in the Western world, across Europe, which is this courting of what I'd call the radical Muslim vote. They're going hard and fast on Gaza, because this isn't, to me, trying to seek the professional class of Muslim vote, the integrated class. It is going to the very heart of the grievance narrative that is deeply rooted within the less integrated elements of the Muslim community. And they have gone you can see very evidently that they have gone after that vote because the Labour Party lost it after October the 7th. And I just cannot, for the life of me, fathom how there are people in the Green Party who can live with the cognitive dissonance of having Zach Polanski at Trans Pride like that, standing in front of some, you know, men in dresses. And then you see what happened in Berlin with an Islamist driving a van into a Pride festival and then courting exactly the same vote. I mean, the centre cannot hold. Does someone need to sit down and explain to the leadership of the Green Party that what we saw decades ago in Iran was the radical Islamists there courted the far-left socialist vote, and then when they used that vehicle to take control, the first people who were murdered were the socialists?
Yes, now, of course, the Green Party would argue that they're not courting the Islamist vote, but, of course, we see evidence of the contrary. And you're absolutely right in terms of much of your analysis. The difficulty here is that we have effectively sold out. This isn't good for democratic politics to try and seek votes at all costs, which is, I believe, what we're doing, a kind of lowest common denominator approach. And nor is it good for the Green Party. It's totally contrary to our values. For example, to seek at all costs the Muslim bloc vote in Gorton and Denton, where we won a, frankly, phenomenal by-election, but at what cost? Many of the voters there, the Muslim voters, had buyer's remorse, even by their own admission. They didn't know, and they weren't told about our LGBT policies. They weren't told about the fact that we advocate for rights for sex workers. I actually think that's a bad policy because no woman is empowered in that position, but that's another matter. But the fact that we weren't being open and transparent about the core of our policies to Muslim voters was disingenuous and a very cynical way of campaigning. Now, in the margins, and particularly with our campaigning on Gaza and Israel-Palestine, we were appealing to that section of support at all costs. And that's a very cynical way of doing politics. And unfortunately, many of that demographic, not only would they be socially conservative by their own account, but many of them are not integrated. And so when we're talking about, you know, some of the things that I've been campaigning on increasing over the last few years is women's sex-based rights and protections, and that of children not to be, you know, pursued through medical malpractice. But the conservative, socially conservative Muslim communities that haven't integrated, and even some of those that have, are expecting women to play a far less than equal role in society. And these are debates and discussions, whether it's women unable to participate in the Tower Hamlets fun run, or whether it's women being forced to wear a veil, unable to shake the hand of somebody, even if they've just won a competition. I believe that these are fundamentally incompatible with British society and British values. And that is not a position which is alien to the majority, I put it to you, of Green Party members. What has become increasingly impossible is to have that discussion openly. And so there is a real conflict between socially conservative and Islamist agendas within the country, us courting that vote and our LGBT position by any lights, by any measure.
Stick with us, Shahrar, please, because we need to take an advert break, but there's more I want to ask you about on the other side. So we're just going to squeeze in a little commercial, but this is a fascinating and important discussion. So don't go anywhere, because the brilliant Shahrar Ali will join us just after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you for waiting. Thank you for your patience. Let's rejoin Shahrar Ali, former Deputy Leader of the Green Party, because I want to talk to you about this. We're touching on some really important topics relating to what is going on in the Green Party. And I said earlier, before I introduced you as a guest, that authoritarianism, whether it be on the left or the right, is represented by what's called the dark triad of personality traits: narcissism, you know, being up yourself, basically, sociopathy, not caring about other people, and Machiavellianism, being sort of strategically quite evil. And it seems to me that if someone is going to exhibit those three elements, it is this particular person, which is a Green Party mayor. Zoe Garbett is her name. Now, she has played a central role in pushing the council that is Green-led, that she leads, to end a 60-year-old partnership with Haifa in northern Israel. Now, Haifa is a beautiful seaside town that is very sort of woke and modern and progressive, and everyone likes going on hollybobs there. And she wrote a letter to Mayor Yonah Yahav on Wednesday, the mayor of Haifa, to basically say, look, we're not going to twin our towns anymore because you're evil. In the letter, she basically said that all the associated municipal ties have to be cancelled. She's asked the mayor to share any views that he may have on the matter by October the 7th. I'm sorry, that's sick. It's sick. I've been to the site of the Nova Festival. I've seen the burnt-out cars. I've watched the videos, the unedited footage at the IDF headquarters. That is the dark triad right there. When did these people start coming into the Green Party? When did they start becoming mayors? When did they start getting positions of power? Because the only person from the Green Party that I've ever really known is my namesake, Alexandra Phillips, who was also elected as an MEP to the South East to the European Parliament at the same time as me. And we might have had massively divergent political views, but she seemed an all right kind of lass. She didn't see the sort of sicko who would do that.
Right. So, firstly, the other Alex Phillips, she was, how shall I put it, well-adjusted. There are still many well-adjusted folk in the Green Party. And with respect to your triad, I would probably suggest it was a very helpful analysis, actually. Unfortunately, one doesn't need to exhibit all three of those in order to exhibit some of these objectionable political behaviours. I have some familiarity with Zoe as well, and I think that on good days she's, very personable, and could make, a decent politician. And I think that what's happening here is increasingly within the Green Party and increasingly, within politics, but especially problematic, is living within your bubble. So let's just unpack what's going on here. On the first instance, Green Party might say that we advocate for boycott, divestment and sanctions. I think there is a case potentially for that, but it also should be reviewed and should be used on a case-by-case basis. And if you look at an interesting example, which might be the Eurovision Song Contest, it's becoming increasingly counterproductive to try and boycott Israel. And I would say there's no point doing it, because what happens is it creates increased voting for Israel for people who feel that they're being unjustly persecuted. So any form of BDS or non-violent direct action needs to be intelligent and pragmatic and practical. In this case, even if it's justified in terms of severing ties with Haifa, which, just to be clear, I think that's an incredibly bad idea, on its own terms, but also consequentially, okay? So that arrangement has been in place since 1968. They've recently had, pre-COVID in any case, Haifa have sent over medical practitioners to help train people in Homerton Hospital. And that's something which we should be encouraging. The best of Jewish collaboration and Israeli collaboration. It's not something we should be cutting off. I don't believe that that is actually a good idea in its own terms. The idea then that you should be doing this, and the Green Party has had a particularly bad track record since October the 7th, 2023, on standing up for Jewish communities. We have seen a spike, a surge in anti-Jewish hatred in the UK. And we don't need to list, we can mention a few in terms of the Manchester Synagogue attacks, 2 Jews killed, the Hatzalah it is important that we think about these things. The Hatzler fire bombings of Jewish ambulances, and it goes on. We've had knife attacks in London. This is exactly the wrong thing we should be doing. We've been alienating the board of Jewish deputies. We've been doing absolutely nothing to reassure the Jewish population in London. And of course, they can have a divergence of political opinion. But we haven't even spoken to, going back to Hackney, the councillors, the Jewish councillors in Hackney, before parading this idea that we're going to write to Haifa around this. We had a councillor, Steinberger, I think it was, Conservative councillor, who wasn't even allowed to finish his speech when he was objecting to any of this going on. So it's the wrong idea in its own terms, and it's doubly problematic because of the foreseeable negative consequences upon the Jewish community, of which there is a large one in Hackney.
But I'm sorry, putting the deadline as October the 7th is just twisted. It's plain twisted. And I went to the kibbutz, one of the kibbutz where the mass slaughter took place. It's right next to Gaza. It's in the Gaza envelope, and you can see from the kibbutz the huge fence that separates Gaza from that part of the south of Israel. And what's amazing about the people of the kibbutz is they are basically the kith and kin of the most people in the Green Party. They have self-sufficient collectives. They live off the land. A lot of them are sort of, you know, smallholders, small farmers. They're very green. They're craftsmen and women. They have their workshops. They all look after each other. They're socialists, basically, in the purest, most original form of that term. And they would fly kites over the fences to drop things over to the kids in Gaza. And these kibbutz were employing Gazans for decades to come and be part of the kibbutz, to be gardeners, to work on their farms, to teach their kids or be babysitters or whatever it may be. And it turns out that some of those Gazans who they were employing were the ones keeping the blueprints to give to Hamas. And when you go to the kibbutz and you see the videos of what happened, babies being shot at point-blank range between the eyes, people being disemboweled, people having their doors slammed shut and held shut while smoke grenades and incendiary devices were thrown into the windows so they were burnt inside their own houses like Auschwitz. When you see what happened on that date and who it happened to, the young people at the Nova Festival were not employees of Benjamin Netanyahu. They were more likely to be sympathetic to trans rights and ecological concerns and the plight of Gaza. And they were slaughtered in cold blood. They were chased like animals. They were burnt in their cars. It was one of the most heinous, horrible, life-changing atrocities. And once you've seen that stuff, you can't unsee it. It changes you forever. And if this woman thinks she's standing up for morality by sending the mayor of Haifa a letter with a deadline to reply of October the 7th, she needs her head checked. She needs psychiatric help.
I don't think she's beyond moral reach, nor do I doubt that she thinks what she's doing is for the best. But as we know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I think within your triad, I think the most appropriate analysis here would be narcissism.
Yeah.
And what we've seen across politics, and certainly in the Green Party, is a kind of identitarian politics. You'll remember even during the Iraq War, going back to, what, 2003, people were saying, "not in my name." And that has become the main vehicle of politics, whether it's through social media, "not in my name," not over my dead body, but no actual reckoning with the practical realities of what's actually happening. And the Green Party is radically losing any opportunity to be any kind of peace broker here, because you make peace with your enemies, and you aren't going to increase the chances of peace by constantly finding ways of demonizing, stigmatizing, and excluding those people, particularly those subset of whom may be on your side. So this is completely the wrong way of going about things. It's obviously virtue signaling. It's counterproductive on its own terms, and it's deeply stigmatizing and unhelpful and damaging to race relations, and in particular our solidarity with Jews in this country. And I should also add that the Green Party says absolutely next to nothing about the 7th of October massacre by those, totally barbaric, off the scale, evil persecution. To the extent that when you see people, we've had a couple of years ago, a so-called Palestinian activist taking ribbons off a synagogue, I think it was, in Muswell Hill, the Green Party had nothing to say about that, as if she was justified in that. And so we see this time and again, a minimisation of the distress, harm and actual violence resulting in death to Jews, whether it's around the world or increasingly in this country, and absolutely nothing to say against Hamas and all those who would support them in this country. And it's appalling, and it's not consistent with Green Party policy. We've also had increasing strife internally around the idea that we should be inaugurating policy that Zionism is racism. And we have alienated Jews within the Green Party, a significant number of them who are organising themselves to try and counteract this.
Oh, do you know, Shahrar, I think it's so dangerous. I think what is brewing in the Green Party is extremely perilous and toxic. And I just want to thank you for your integrity and your courage in standing up and talking about these things. Shahrar Ali, who is former deputy leader of the Green Party. All right, Ian. I mean, what is that? What is the Green Party today?
Well, is it compulsory, by the way? You have to have that kind of weird pink hair at some level.
If you're a narcissist, yeah, you've got to have a big sort of beacon going, look at me, look at me.
That just seems to be like the thing, doesn't it?
Well, no, because it's narcissism. If you actually look at the psychological tropes of someone on the far left, it is the dark triad. It is sociopathy, narcissism and Machiavellianism, but particularly narcissism. Shahrar Ali was right about that. I had someone on a while ago talking about how leftism is narcissism, because it's performance.
I agree. Well, it is performance, because it's essentially an ideology or a thought process that's adapted because you think it makes you a nicer person. It's that simple. It's that simple.
It's the look at me, aren't I wonderful, which is why they need to, like, you know, have brightly coloured hair.
Well, the great giveaway is when you see the biogs on social media, things like, I believe in justice. It's like, but do we all believe in justice, you half-wit? Of course we